Peace, peace, family. Abiba Fahodie. Greetings. Welcome, everybody, to today's roundtable. Again, this is Master Fodia Jamu. I'm a member of Jicho La Kimbunga, a brotherhood of Pan-Africanists and Black Nationalists. We bring to you today another African Survival Initiative roundtable, and the theme of today's roundtable is we are here to honor Malcolm, Lumumba, and Fanon, particularly because it is 2025, and all three of those brothers, along with other great Black revolutionary figures like Robert Williams, like Medgar Evers, were also born in the same year of 1925, and other very important events took place in the same year of 1925. So we're experiencing somewhat of a sentinel. But in terms of Malcolm, Lumumba, and Fanon, they were all born in 1925. And so we want to honor them on their centennial of their birth year today. We just honored Baba Omowale Malcolm yesterday. And so now we're here just to bring to the attention of the community all of the different dynamics that go into honoring these men in particularly, and how we can use it to empower ourselves now. So with no further ado, you know how we do already as a brotherhood. We honor our elders, we honor our ancestors. First and foremost, we want to bring them together through the essence of our own PG, Baba Akili Nkrumah, and we want him to come and call the ancestors near. And let's take a libation break.
Hotep, Alafia, as we gather as in this brotherhood and reach out to our families and communities, we always want to make sure we bring in our ancestral spirits. And first and foremost, we want to bring in the Most High God. Whatever term or terminology or name you choose, please recite it so that that person and that energy can be a part of this meeting. We also want to bring in the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey and Edward Blyden, leaders in the development of the philosophy of universal African nationalism, and Marcus Messiah Garvey penned it. We also want to recognize Queen Mother Nzinga, Queen Mother Moore, Queen Mother Amy Jacques Garvey, Queen Mother and Queen Mother Ma'at, so that we truly bridge the gap and understand who we are. We are going to call the spirit of the Honorable Malcolm X, El-Haj Malik Al-Shabazz, the spirit of Patrice Lumumba, the spirit of France Fanon, the spirit of our queens, Queen Nefertiti. We do this so that we understand that we are only moving forward with their guidance and their strength. We stand on our truth. We stand on one God, one aim, one destiny, one Africa.
All right, so there you have it. Ashe, Ashe, Asheo. Thank you very much, the most honorable PG, Akili Nkrumah, for that libation and calling of the ancestral spirit near us. I think we're ready to proceed now. And of course, the first thing is to bring out our panelists. If we can bring them out one by one, we can facilitate introductions. Right, first and foremost, we have Baba Senghor Baye, First Assistant President General, UNIA ACRC 2020, and this brother is a key member of Jicho La Kimbunga. How you doing, Baba?
I'm good, man. I'm before me, and I'd like to say hotep to everybody, and get ready, because our ancestors waiting and watching, and children crying and dying, because we still are too apathetic as a whole people to get back to our traditional greatness and take sovereignty back, take our continent of Africa back.
Okay. All right, next. PG, as you already know, we just met PG. PG just blessed us with the ancestors. Salute, PG.
Yes, sir. Hotep family.
Yeah, man, race first.
Race first.
We got brother Black Migos. Peace, brother. I think the brother is currently driving, but he's tapped in all the way. Another member of the Jicho La Kimbunga Brotherhood. Peace, brother.
And BB for ODA.
Yeah, welcome, welcome. About to have a great conversation for the people, man.
Right.
Right. Baba Shakara. Right. Kimbunga Media, as well as the Jicho La Kimbunga Brotherhood. We're here to really, really have a serious, profound conversation about the men that we're here to.
Chief, your sound appears to have dropped. Chief, can you hear me? Oh. All right, brothers and sisters. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can be heard. Yes.
Yes, you can be heard.
Hey, no, I can't seem to hear y'all. That's an issue. Some technicals are happening here, brothers and sisters. Wait, I know what the problem is. Hold on a second. All right. Somebody speak for a second.
Yes, can you hear us?
Okay, all right, cool. We got you. Let me. Mansafone is back, so let's see if we got him as well. Go ahead, Chief.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Oh man, well, I don't know what happened.
No idea.
Yeah. So
there's evil in this. There's evil spirits too. So this conversation, they kind of like afraid of hearing. It's all good.
Yeah, it's all good.
Just
Well, let me just say that we plan to start off with basically an intro by going back to 1925 and hearing from our distinguished elders and also our young intellectuals, our own perspective on that and reflection. So I would like to start first with calling, of course, PG Achille and Krumah to start it off. Then Baba Senghor, you can back Achille up. We're gonna build this like a pyramid, you know. So y'all go ahead and set it off, man. We're gonna pass it after y'all.
So and I'll jump in, and then I know Senghor will be complimentary and lead it on. The object here is understanding the men that we identify, but recognizing that there were many people that started off in 1925 as the world was in disarray. Black people at that point were being taught not to be like being Black. You know, we were being taught that being Caucasian and educated by them and trained by them was the way. I'll give a comment that I think is also very positive. At that time, we as a people, though, however, had more respect in our family for our elders and for those ancestral people, all those people around us. We had more respect for the men and the women, and men and women had more respect for themselves at that time, according to elders that have talked to me about that time. I didn't live in 1925, but my understanding that is the root of how I grew up, with that connection to that respect. So that's extremely important as we as a race move forward. Malcolm's coming at that particular point in time. I will also point out that the white world was also in disarray. You see, so it was like our ancestors say we need to put this energy out here now to move them to the year 2000. Because we don't get to the year 2000 with positivity without that energy from 1925, without that energy coming, even as 25 related to the damage that was being done to the UNIA, ACL, and Marcus Messiah Garvey. That energy, that negativity still breathed the positivity and the development of us as a people. It was no accident. It didn't just happen. It was for real. And in being for real, we have to also recognize our own truths. And I believe we do that because if you look at the material that they produced for us to read and follow, it was based on the most inhuman conditions that our people had experienced. You know, we move forward on that. Malcolm, Lumumba was seen as the next leader of Africa because of his commitment to Africa. France Fanon's commitment to revolutionary change, her black skin, white man, speaks very much to our own self-hate that developed in us because of the oppression that we felt. It was psychological. As Amos Wilson also, and I know he's not 1925, but Amos Wilson wrote it too. He said, you can't follow them, and they are liars and deceivers, and think that you're gonna be okay with the truth. So I'm gonna pass the ball to Brother Senghor because let's rock.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
man. Thank you, Baba. Hey, right before you take the mic, Baba Senghor, I want to welcome Brother Ajay Tahimba from the Harlem Liberation School. Welcome, brother. Also, a great member of Jicho La Kimbunga Brotherhood. Peace. All right, Baba.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna, try to add some things that PG Baba Kili did not share. And first of all, we need to be clear of what was happening at the time period. In the 1920s period, even 1925, a lot of Black people were still being hung from trees all across the US of A and other places. It was a critical time. It was a time that Yurugu attacked Marcus Garvey, and Marcus Garvey's appeals were denied, and he started serving a 5-year sentence in 1925. So as the UNIA and a lot of brothers and sisters that were moving more towards self-reliance that came together in 1920 from around the world to move more in self-determination direction, we were sort of pit against some of the lackeys, I would say, or so those folks who thought that the Republican Party, which most Black people were involved with in the US of A, was going to do something for them, and they were kowtowing to Yurugu. So they were really jealous of Marcus Garvey because Marcus Garvey definitely took charge of the minds of the grassroots people. So we had all of these dynamics going on. And so I personally believe that the Creator chose to send Patrice Lumumba, Malcolm, Fanon, and I want to add one brother, Ross Sam Brown, and many, many others to us in 1925. In fact, my mother was born shortly thereafter, my mom's. So we were living in a time period, like the President General said, that our elders who taught us were growing up in the UNIA. Like, Charles L. James, who taught me, he was growing up as a youngin'. And so we had all these giants growing up, listening to their elders, as Baba Kili said, respecting their elders who came before them. And of course, the whole movements, not just the UNIA, but all the progressive movements were charging off of what happened some time ago in Haiti. So we had this spirit amongst us that we could do something positive for ourselves and beat down the oppression that was coming at us. So 1925 was a very significant time period. We now 100 years from that. And if you look at what happened from 1925, the birth of Patrice Lumumba, the birth of Malcolm, the birth of Fanon, and how they grew up and how they moved forward, we are responsible for carrying that ancestral energy on before them as well as them, because they set strong examples of continuing what the many ancestors who came before them were up against. And so we see that as a very significant time period of the 20th century. Of course, the Garvey movement was moving straightforward in terms of connecting Black people, Pan-African, worldwide. And then we had these others of our family who thought that they could go along and get along with the system. So anyway, that time period was a very critical time period. And right now, we need to look at that because I do believe things happen in cycles of 20 and 100 years. So we are kind of facing, and we're going to talk about all the things we face with now, but we need that whirlwind energy. We need Jicho La Kimbunga now because we need that energy to help us see who we are so we can defeat Yurugu. And in closing, a lot of times our African people get confused and think they can fight for this or that. And I want to lay this out there because comes up to where we are today. And I know you wanted to stay with 1925, but we are witnessing the so-called three-party Yurugu system be taken down. and taken back, similar to what was happening in the 1920s.
Right. 1925, exactly.
Right. 1925 around the world. And you got this kingdomship that's trying to take over. So we see the war that's going on with Urugu is extremely deep. And Garvey told us when they fighting, we need to organize because ain't neither one of them on our side.
But to your point on, and I'll just want to add to your point, in 1925 was the launching of Mein Kampf, which started your Hitler movement and the destruction of the white world. You also had another war that was taking place at that time, and realized that the stock market had recently crashed, and therefore America was in disarray. And therefore, the things that you have mentioned and that I've mentioned going on, recognizing that they were born at the time to usher in the change that we felt in the 50s and the 60s. See, I'm going to give them from 25 to 50 because that means they're now 25 years in this world. See, they 25 years in this world, 1950. Now they're telling you, look at what the white man did to himself and realize what he do to you. See, when Marcus said to the Ku Klux Klan, we got more trees in Africa, stop lynching my people, right? Then the realization of that Pan-Africanism started to come to fruition in 1950. Not shortly after that, did Patrice Lumumba travel to America. I think it was 1960. He traveled here. And then he was identified by 1958 because he was then identified by President Eisenhower to be assassinated because of the role that he was playing in unifying and bringing the Congo into existence. Timing is important. So although we realized in 1925 the events, we were being lynched, but at the same time we were growing stronger.
Absolutely. I want to jump right to Baba Aj, because of course he's representing the Harlem Liberation School, and we're talking about 1925, and you represent Harlem right now live. Can you give us what was Harlem in 1925? Why is it so important to know 1925 Harlem?
Yes, sir. Peace to the brotherhood. Jicho La Kimbunga. Always a pleasure to be with my brothers. I have to say very quickly, I want to give a shout out to the December 12th movement, the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, for a very powerful event yesterday honoring the 60th unfortunate commemoration of the assassination and murder of Brother Malcolm X. Very powerful event. And they're keeping his momentum alive. Having said that, I took a few notes so I wouldn't forget anything important. So we talk about Harlem. We talk about a Harlem Renaissance going on. We're talking about 1917, the Red Summer, black soldiers returning from World War I, getting mercilessly massacred and lynched many times in their uniforms. And this kind of adding to a new Negro movement, adding to a Garveyite movement, and adding to a Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
We also have a brother who's very rarely mentioned, but needs mention, Cyril Briggs of the African Blood Brotherhood in Harlem, right there on 135th Street headquarters. That these brothers were arming up. They had probably more of a socialist sort of and nationalist blend than say a Garveyite movement, but they were more clandestine and secretive. But they were arming up and sending brothers to Tulsa when that jumped off. So a lot is going on in Harlem, a lot around Garvey, political nationalism, global Pan-Africanism. He has businesses. He's not just telling us, don't have your kids playing with white dolls. He has an actual black doll manufacturing company in Harlem. So he's doing things that actually lend themselves to being part of the solution, not just talking. Also, I want to say there's stuff that happens before 25 that's important. Right. So think about the fact that these black people, Africans in these different European nations, are made to fight on the side of their colonial masters in World War I. So that's politicizing a lot of soldiers, man. And one of those people who would have to have been affected by that would be a brother that grew up in Martinique, later is in Algiers, named Frantz Fanon. So all of these things help to politicize the soldiers, the Black and African citizenry. Things are passed down generation to generation. People are reading, they're observing what's going on around the country, and that also creates a Pan-Africanist sentiment. So that's important too. But Harlem is absolutely bubbling. But we also have to remember that there's sculptors, there's writers, intellectuals, Du Bois, all these people are emerging. Langston Hughes, Claude McKay, many of them formerly involved with Communist Party, many of them disenchanted, disillusioned, breaking away, rocking with Garvey. So a lot is going on during this time in Harlem. And then you got jazz. It's a lot, man. It's just so much bubbling at the same time. We're talking about culture. We're talking about intellectual, I guess we'll call it radicalism. We're talking about grassroots political movement through Garvey and Cyril Briggs, even involving self-defense and the idea of Pan-Africanism. So much is going on. Like, that's a whole show almost. Right. But for now, that's what I would say.
Wow.
So, Chief, Chief, before we move forward, Chief, thank you, brother Ajay. That was right on time, man. But you reminded me. I want to hail up brother A. Peter Bailey, who worked with Malcolm, who was at Sankofa yesterday here in D.C. They did a wonderful program too. And if you go to my Facebook page, Single by A, you will actually see that program. And I did see some of the program that went on in New York. It was bubbling. Also programs out in the Midwest and all over the place in honoring not the death of Malcolm, but the resurrection of Malcolm's spirit yesterday. And that was powerful. And then last but not least, I failed to mention Dr. Carter G. Woodson, who also during this time period was bucking on the so-called Urugu historians and made a move to set in place a self-reliant move for Black people to deal with our own story. And that happened right in that same era, in 1926, in fact.
Absolutely.
And not only that, his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, was published in the Negro world before it was published in book form. So just like Baba Ajay said, there was so much going on across the board. But the main thing we need to see is that Black people were sick and tired of getting lynched, getting killed in the war, coming home and being treated like dirt. And no matter what ideology or philosophy we were following, everybody was rising up to do something for our own selves. And that's very, very important.
That's right. Hey, thank you, Baba Ajay, man, for that breakdown. That was a great segue into the next part of the conversation. But I want to say that this was also in the height of the first Great Migration. There was a lot of people coming up from the South, a lot of rural people becoming urbanized for the first time, a lot of literature, and a lot of people becoming more literate. I believe that they said in 1865, at the end of the Civil War, we had like 2% literacy. But by 1930, we had like 62% literacy, something that has never happened in any other group to become that literate that fast. We did it on the United States as Black people coming out of slavery. And so I think that 1925 was like a peaking point. From 1865 to 1925 was like a build up towards who we was going to be in that country, even today. Because when you look at like the literary contributions, you look at the musical contributions, all of that is what we live in right now. We're talking about hip hop. We're talking about urban writing. Whatever you're talking about, the whole literacy, it comes from that period right there where it became part of our personality. We was building an African personality. We was telling the world who we was. Nobody was telling us who we was no more. We was standing up. We were saying we Black, we Africans, we a nation, and we proud, and we fighting back. And so a very, very powerful reflection, because here we are 100 years later. And it's a powerful reflection. I wanted to bring Brother Black Megas into this conversation as well. He's also a member of Jicho La Kimbunga and a very wise brother who I know got some gems to bring to the conversation.
All right. Now, I first want to say that
for this discussion, I had to do some digging on some information because there are antithetical dates and events of things that led up to 1925, but also to the personal struggles of our ancestors who were born at that time, who we are honoring today, with their fights. And excuse me if I sound like I'm rambling a little bit. I was up till 4 in the rise, my time, which is 6 in the rise, you guys' time. This is all right. You don't sound like you rambling. I'm following you. You're all right.
All right. So just to know that this will be on my end a little bit of a I would have preferred to do this from my laptop other than my phone, but I was mobile at the time. But this will be sort of a interactive thing on my end. So I need everybody within earshot of this. You know, if you're on your laptop or your phone or whatever, I need you to go online and just search for Ngram, the letter N, GRAM. That should bring you to the Google Ngram viewer. That is a that is a histography word search where you can find words and themes and people who were discussed, and it will give you a timeline of those things within publications. Anytime that these words were used in publication, you will find that. Once you have that up, I do not use this word, so I will not spell the word. And I think y'all brothers know what word I'm talking about. But it is the N word, you know, the hard R. The hard R. I want you to pull that word up. And once you have that word up, you should have a graph that is up that shows you from the 1800s up into 2020 the usage of that word and what it looks like. When you have that up, you will then take notice of how in the 1960s, right? In 1964, 1965, right? When our people received emancipation or so-called freedom, you see the usage of that word greatly dropping and then leveling out by the 1870s. There you go. That helps right there, so everybody can see. You see that leveling out. Now, what you have to know, here's some important dates, some events of things that were happening around that time. You had the reason why I come for the 1925 discussion with first going back, you know, Sankofa, is because we have to discuss
forward.
We have to discuss our enemies and who our enemies were. And one of the enemies who never gets talked about are well, to be straightforward, people who call themselves Jews, or the European Ashkenaz, the Khazars, the Sephardim, those Jewish people, as they like to call themselves. They call themselves Jewish. Well, that's exactly what they are. They are Jewish, as we know they are not of the original Jews, of the African Jews. So the Jewish Confederate leader, Judah P. Benjamin, who funded the rise of the Ku Klux Klan with Nathan Bedford Forrest in 1867. In 1867, the KKK formed as a socialist party to go and destroy the Republican Party during that time, because we know, as already stated, you know, that's where African people found themselves politically, and that's where they were making great strides. So that mixed in with looking at that Ngram viewer, you can see that once we have emancipation, we find that there is a calm within the usage of that word. But at the same time, there were great civil uprisings and murders of our people because the northern soldiers were now being taken from out of the South, where they were protecting our ancestors, to now being allowed to go in and wholeheartedly slaughter. A lot of people don't know that this was all funded by Judah P. Benjamin. During the 1870s, the killing of Black people was a significant issue, often driven by racial violence. One notable event was the Hamburg Massacre of 1876, where over 100 white men attacked 30 Black servicemen of the National Guard in Hamburg, South Carolina. The period of this Civil War, we seen more lynchings of our ancestors. There were over 2,000 lynchings from 1865 to 1877. That was more than what we would see in the next preceding years. That's how dangerous of a time this was for our people. And these coverted things were not talked about. It always gets thrown on. It's the Anglos. They say whites, but as African people, we look at Jewish people and all we see is white people. So we don't distinguish. There's a difference. We just see white. But then when Jewish people tell us, "Oh, we are with you. We're one with you in your struggles," we sit back and say, "Oh, look at the plights that they have had. They are of one of us," without ever looking at the covert things that they did, such as the formation of the NAACP, and they only put a token Negro on the board with them. We don't look at the Jew, D.W. Griffin, and his creation of the film The Birth of a Nation in 1915, a film that President Woodrow Wilson would show at the White House with his exact words to that, being that it is like writing history with lighting. And my only regret is that it is all so terribly true. For those who don't know what the original film production of The Birth of a Nation is, it follows the Klansmen. For those who don't know, the Ku Klux Klan started kind of dying off going into the 1900s. This film reignited the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. Once the Ku Klux Klan was reignited at that time, we would then see in 1916, going into 1921 and into 1925, the raids and massacres of Black sovereign towns, what we call Red Summer, but one that we don't hear about a lot is the Elaine massacre, which happened in Tennessee, where brothers got up and they fought back. But of course, was our brothers, more specifically the Moore defendants. It was a group of about 5 brothers with the last name of Moore. I can't remember all of their names off the top of my head. It would be in 1925 that those brothers would actually be exonerated, or not exonerated, but released from prison by the Tennessee governor at that time, giving them a furlough on their prison sentence, because they were all sentenced to death for
it was a pardon on their sentence.
Correct for their involvement in the death of a white woman at that time. In 1916, you would have the Jewish poet Carl Sandburg, who wrote the poem "The N-Word," stating that this is the most beautiful word of the Negro should be using to call himself by. That again, these are antithetical things done by Jewish people. If you go through that Ngram viewer, you are able to go down to the bottom of that page and look at publications of things that were done. Of years. If you select any of those years, it's going to bring up books or any publication where the N-word was used. You will also be able to see who the author is. You select the name of many of those authors, you will find that they were Jewish. Joseph Conrad, though not acknowledging that he was Jewish, he was born in a Jewish community and raised with Jewish culture, but he does not claim to be Jewish. As we know, during the 1800s up into the 1950s, the common thing for Jewish people to do was to hide who they were and their heritage, so that people would not be able to link any of these things to the Jewish people. You would also go ahead, brother.
No, just wrap it up. Wrap it up.
Got you.
Yeah, a minute or two.
Got you. So this is what led the UNIA, of course, in 1920 with the Declaration of with the Declaration of Rights for Negro Peoples. And of course, I'm going to focus on Declaration 11, which is we deprecate the use of the N-word as applied to Negroes and the demand of the word Negro to be capitalized with the letter N. By 1925, the N-word would, if you look at the Ngram viewer, by 1925, the N-word would begin to rise in usage within publications proven by that Ngram viewer. And in February 1925, Garvey's bond was revoked on the 1923 mail fraud case. After Garvey's arrest, there would be publications by Jewish authors such as Ford, and Joseph Conrad's The End of the Narcissist, Dorothy Scarberg's On the Trial of Negro Folks, and Henry J. Wyman's Black Jokes for Blue Devils, Chuck Full of Darky Fun, Colored. Garvey would later say, in his own words, that it was his trial was, he was, to be straightforward about it, he felt as if he was sentenced unfairly, unjustly by a Jewish judge, by a Jewish lawyer, and by a Jewish jury. Those were Garvey's words. So we can go forth and then look at the plights of our ancestors, who we are more referencing right now, with Frantz Fanon falling under the Marxist-Lenin ideology, but people don't know who Karl Marx or Karl Henry Marx and Vladimir Lenin were. They were both Jewish people. We also have Malcolm X, who went against things, and we also have Patrice Lumumba, who was eventually murdered by Mobutu Sese Seko, who was working on behalf of the Jewish Belgians of King Leopold.
Let's save a little bit of the conversation for the table topic. Right now, we're about 1925.
Great.
And but the reason why I allowed you to continue, brother, is because it's the perspective that most people don't give us. And you're absolutely right. Marcus Mosiah Garvey was vocal about the ethnicity of the judge and other people involved in the movements that was directly aiming against his movement. He understood the Jewish connection. I appreciate you pointing that out, and even giving us, an overview of how the Ku Klux Klan came into existence and the impact that they had and how it built up. I really appreciate you showing us the chart so we could see how the word was even being used and how it was being published and who was publishing this word and why Garvey and the UNIA would have had number 11. Kill that word,
To add to that,
it's very important. I appreciate your contribution. I know a lot of times people don't know how to articulate themselves as clearly as you have, but I appreciate your contribution in that way. Baba PG, you got anything to say before we go to Shakara?
What I wanted to add was, although the Jewish role was significant, it was also other Europeans that followed suit, because they too believed in the destruction of people of African descent, and not just King Leopold, but other white folks across the globe. Because remember, the Anglo-Saxon Protestant who founded this quote unquote nation, who never got here, came out of England, and they too. And as you say, they weren't Jewish people by being Jewish. They were Jewish people by affiliation. they took on a religion that was not theirs, because the honorable understanding of the religion steps out of our own ancestral realm, of which they took a part of, and therefore began to steal, rape, and murder people of African descent in order for them to have a history of their own. They try to build it on our backs.
I say. Thank you, Baba. Brother Shakara, I can't wait to get your contribution to this. 1925, brother, what we looking at?
Yes. Before I begin, I do want to just take a moment to just raise the spirit of a warrior who we lost in the shores of the UK recently, a brother by the name of Twilight Bay, who was actually born in Texas and grew up in South Central LA. He was one of the brothers who was instrumental to the truce that was called between the Bloods and the Crips in the 90s. And he spent the majority of the latter part of his life living in London. He married a sister from these shores, who lived in these shores, and was doing beautiful, beautiful work in the community, particularly with the lessons that he had learned from his upbringing, and trying to resolve a lot of the issues that we were having over here with similar, along similar lines, brothers and sisters. And he passed away, last week. And we were able to celebrate his 9th night yesterday. Yesterday being the 60th anniversary of the assassination of Omowale Malcolm X. And if you knew Brother Twilight Bay, you would know how fitting that is. Twilight Bay, and on a personal level, he's a part of my extended family, because he's the brother-in-law of my adoptive big brother, Amenoir, who, among other things, I share a spoken word collective with. He's the sole parent to my son, all kinds of different things. And so, the community's been hit hard over here. But if we speak about men who walked in the spirit of Omowale Malcolm X, Twilight Bay was definitely one of those brothers. So I just want to, just begin by honoring that spirit. It's a lot right now over here. We lost a real warrior, but we give thanks for his life and his work nonetheless. In relation to 1925, and I'm not going to be long, I know we need to move on. I just want to highlight, just based upon what my elder brothers have said, just a couple of things. The first is in relation to something coming out of what Baba Aji said, which is in relation to Mass European War II, Mass European Travel War, one. And the fact that between 1919 and 1920, they had the Paris Peace Conference, which gave birth to the League of Nations, in 1920, where they kind of reconsolidated and updated the colonial project with a number of different mandates, which they used to kind of formalize and legalize the status and their status as colonizers of African people. One of the interesting things about the conference is that there were 3 African nations who were a part of it who had some semblance of independence. One was Liberia, the other was Ethiopia, and the other was the nation of Haiti. Haiti at the time was under the occupation of the United States government. The United States government had Haiti under occupation from 1915 to 1934. And so even at that time of 1925, Haiti was still under occupation. But at the Paris Peace Conference, they were not allowed to speak about the fact. They were attending the conference, and the fact that they attended was a symbol of great pride in terms of African nationhood for Africans around the world. And the UNIA ASI at that time had connections with Haiti brothers and sisters who were at the conference, because as we know, the UNIA ACL made representation to that conference as well. And so I just wanted to highlight the nature of colonialism at the time and what was actually taking place. So another important factor to take note of is the fact that in 1908, the Belgian government took over the colonization of the Congo from King Leopold II, Yeah, bearing in mind that at this time the population of the Congo had been halved as a result of the fact that somewhere they say, and the estimates vary because the information is, sparse. But at the same time, I've seen estimates from between 10 million and 20 million lives were lost in the Congo between the late 1800s and 1908 under King Leopold's reign. And so instead of, giving back autonomy to African people, the Belgian government took over and continued forms of colonialism that went on up until the June the 30th, 1960, with the ascendancy of Papa Patrice Lumumba to the prime ministership in the Congo. Yeah, so we just have to understand what our people in the Congo were facing during that time. And finally, I do want to make reference to the fact that Wilfred, the older brother of Omowale Malcolm X, speaks of the fact that when the most honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey was traveling in the United States, one of the homes that he would stay in was the home of Earl Little and Louise Little. Yes. That would have been, I think, in Lansing, Michigan at the time. I think, that time period will take them to Lansing, Michigan. And this was when he was being hounded by the American authorities. And so it's possible that Papa Garvey would have shared the home with the Little family, whilst Mama Louise Little would have been pregnant with Papa Omowale Malcolm X. Yeah. And so those connections are all there. And I just wanted to throw that one into the mix, because as we know, that family was raised as a strong Garveyite family. And Wilfred also tells the story of the fact that one day in school, they had to recite the Star Spangled Banner, the American national anthem. And so he informed the teacher that we Negroes have an anthem as well. and the teacher asked Wilfred to sing the anthem. So Wilfred got up and sang the Universal Ethiopian anthem in his classroom, brothers and sisters. Yeah. So that was the strength and the nature of the sense of nationhood that African people were developing at a time when that sense of nationhood and desire to see it come into fruition was being crushed all over the world. I just want to add another name to those that have already been mentioned in terms of people who were born in 1925, and that is the name of Medgar Evers. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you, brother.
Great.
I want to give y'all a heads up that it's getting dark and I don't have lights on in my house, so I might have to cut this camera off. But I'm still here to moderate. That was a great segue into the next conversation. I just want to go over the table topics real quick. Baba Senghor, you got something to say?
No.
Okay. All right. I want to go over the table topics so everyone knows what we're going to be discussing for the next hour or so. The first table topic, we will make personal reflections in terms of Malcolm, Lumumba, and Fanon. We've all been influenced by these three. And also, even though that's the title and the theme of this conversation, we can elaborate on the others like Medgar Evers and Robert Williams as well, and just pay homage to all the brothers and sisters from 1925. Maybe we have some great warrior queens who was born the same year and we overlooking them right now. So let's try to get that energy and, maximize it. But we will definitely be reflecting on Malcolm, Lumumba, and Fanon, our own personal reflections. And then we'll talk briefly about the Rwanda and Congo crisis. Brother Shakaraz is doing some great analysis and doing some great work to raise the awareness of the general African community to what is the hell is happening in the Congo. A lot of people don't know, and there's a lot of theories. And I think it'd make for a great conversation that we're addressing the legacy of Patrice Lumumba today, that we must give some homage and pay some attention to the current crisis going on in the Congo. Thirdly, we'll be talking about the AES, the setting of new standards in terms of building Pan-Africanism, the struggle for sovereignty statehood for African people, on the continent today. So we'll be talking about the setting of new standards as a consequence of the Sahel Alliance coming into existence. We'll also talk about the importance of protecting our leaders and why security is a priority right now and always has been within the context of the conversation. And then lastly, we'll talk about Garvey's recent pardon and the ongoing fight to free all of our political prisoners. We'll close out there. All right. So at some time, if my camera goes off, I'm still here. I'll still be moderating. But let's go on with that conversation. I think I'll start off with my personal reflections of Malcolm. Of course, I was born in 1979, so I was gone. He was gone 15, 14 before I even breathed my first breath of air. However, I believe that I've been able to have somewhat of a spiritual and intellectual conversation and relationship with Baba Malcolm because our lives were very similar, coming from the same kind of parents, coming from the same, American background, and also, coming through the streets and going through the prisons and going into the struggle and cleaning up his act, becoming inspiration. So for me, I would say Malcolm was like my first real superhero. I knew about Malcolm before I knew about Garvey. Malcolm was the first one that I knew. I remember in the early 90s, I believe it was a sensation around the Malcolm X hats. And the Malcolm X movie came out. And it was like this rebirth of remembering Malcolm. And for me, that's when I really understood, who he was. Over the years, I've had a very spiritual relationship with Malcolm X. Later on, I was able to learn that we share some. Our relatives shared a very close relationship with each other in the past. So Malcolm X, he also was very close organized with my cousin Jeremiah Shabazz. Jeremiah Shabazz was the minister of Temple Number 12 in Philadelphia, and so they literally stayed in one house. Jeremiah Shabazz is accredited for recruiting Muhammad Ali and then being Muhammad Ali's mentor, big brother within the Nation of Islam. So my cousin and Malcolm had a very close relationship. Later on, I also would develop a close relationship with Malcolm X's grandson, his namesake, and his first male heir, El Hajj Malcolm Latif Shabazz, RIP. So just thinking of Malcolm X, it feels like I'm thinking about a family member, a comrade, a relative who just lived and gave his life before my time. So I think of him like a more direct ancestor, not only because of the politics, but because of the personal relationships involved as well. So I just look at Malcolm like, he was the embodiment of our manhood. And really, he set it off for a lot of people who would transform their lives, inspired by him. In terms of Lumumba, I think I may have first heard Lumumba mentioned through Malcolm. I was reading Malcolm Speaks, and I used to read the Malcolm Speaks, his speeches, because he was dropping gems in his speeches that they're not in these little Facebook snippets. He was dropping gems, so I've always researched the people and places. Like I remember he mentioned the Bandung Conference, and I said, what is that? What is the Bandung Conference? And I understood about Afro-Asian unity and what was really happening at that time and how Asians and Africans was working together against white supremacy, against Western imperialism. And so that's how I came about Lumumba. I believe Malcolm said Lumumba was like the greatest African alive or something like that. He gave him a big compliment. And I said, whoa, who is this guy? And it piqued my interest in Lumumba. With Lumumba, I have a sadness in my heart for when I think about Lumumba because I believe he was ahead of his time, and it took tremendous courage to say the things that he did and do the things that he did. But the fact that he was able to go to America and address our people and explain to us, also in the legacy of Nkrumah, Sankara, they go to the community, to Harlem, to where our people was at, and bind with the community. So I always felt like Lumumba was a brother, man. Like, this is the kind of Africans born on the continent that we need to be connected to. Those who got the spirit of Lumumba. When you hear Lumumba's courageous speech, right in front of the colonial masters, and you understand the dynamics of it, it lets you know that this was a man of great heart. Also, behind Lumumba was real struggle. Lumumba had very serious comrades, and at one point, Lumumba controlled the eastern region of the Congo. This same region that's in conflict now, Lumumba and his followers controlled that. And so I want us to keep that in perspective as well, because Lumumba, he wasn't necessarily a politician. He was playing a political role, but Lumumba was a revolutionary. And after he was assassinated, his comrades continued, and then they did what was called the Simba Rebellion. So we could talk more about that, but that's it. For Fanon, I remember reading about, I'm reading The Wretched of the Earth. And it was the first time I was able to understand, like from a psychiatrist's perspective, what the revolution was. Because I remember him talking about how he was working with at-risk youth before the revolution, before the Algerian Revolution. And, they was drinking and smoking marijuana and wasting their time. And they would be, quote unquote, what you would call street youth. But during the revolution, he was reflecting that these became the leaders of the revolution. The street youth, once they was armed and fighting against the enemy, became the revolutionaries. And so he was analyzing that, and so many different aspects of the colonial brainwashing of our people. So Fanon is very important as well. I've gained tremendously from all three of these brothers' example, and so I don't want to hog up all the time. I just want to set it off and then pass it from there. We can do the same angle from PG on down. PG, Baba, IJ. We can do the same rotation. All right.
Malcolm, you started with Malcolm, so I'll go there too. I learned about Malcolm early on. I had the opportunity with my father to attend a street rally in Harlem and hear him speak, and then have an opportunity to hear him speak here again in Philadelphia. And it was inspirational. But reading his life story was even more so, because it mirrored the life story of many of men and many of men that I knew. It did. And knowing and then learning of his impact. You see, Malcolm's impact, as you said earlier, was the development of a Black manhood. That's how he was viewed. He was viewed as a person who had come through life's journey and said, hey, I now know who I am. And therefore, let me help teach you who you are. I still today have Ballad of the Bullets of Malcolm's 33 and a third LPM. I just can't wait to get another recorder to play it on. I have his speeches. And when you listen to his speeches and you listen to him speak, he speaks truth to power. And we say that all the time. You got to speak truth to power. So Malcolm was very informative and very formative for me. And I also had the opportunity to teach his grandson about who he was. So he attended the Marcus Garvey Schule of Positive Education here in Philadelphia. Patrice Lumumba I learned about too as a youngster, because when Patrice Lumumba visited America, I was a youngster. And so he was inspirational as well, because here was a Black man leading a nation and coming here and saying, you can do this too. You can make this move. And he stood the white here on their toes, and they became afraid of Patrice Lumumba, just as they were afraid of El-Hassan Malik al-Shabazz, better known to us as Malcolm X. That fear is what caused him to be assassinated. People believe that by his killing, they took away the founder of a great African nation that would have unified Africa across the board, because they believed he had that in him. They even to the president at that time, Eisenhower, attempted to have him assassinated by poisoning his toothpaste. It's just amazing. Frantz Fanon, as my consciousness grew, I began to understand Frantz Fanon. And the book that stands out most to me was Black Skin, White Mask, and then Toward the African Revolution, the story of him in Algiers. And I still keep that book with me now. We have to understand the impact of our slavery the impact of our incarceration, the impact of our domination, and understanding how that reflects through us trying to be what we are not. We will not be white. We have to understand that. I think when you pull those three men together, you get the lesson of the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey that started long before they actually entered the world. You see, I think we have to recognize the connection. One of the things the brother that was speaking earlier, he was showing the connection in time. But the reason I think we pointed to 1925, because in that period, those men were brought into the world in order for us to do what we're doing today. I think it's important that we understand that. Yeah, I was a hood rat. I ain't gonna tell no lie. I grew up in North Philadelphia. Rumbling was what I knew how to do. But I was also smart. I was smart enough to pick up a book and use that knowledge that I gained in order to bring the change. And that was important. And those three men that we mentioned did much of the same thing. They did much of the same thing. They had their times coming through, but they managed to do it in a way that we today can sit here and celebrate their lives and realize that we have to be committed the same as they were, the same as the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, the same as the men and women of that period. You see, none of this is by happenstance. It all connects. And we're connected to them because this is 2025 and we still have work to do. Father Senghor.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I'm not gonna repeat some of the same things that Brother Chief and Achilles said that that have also, I would say. I'm gonna save time for some other things, but let me start. I gotta start with Malcolm, our shining black prince, because and coming up as a young man, I actually came through the streets. I figured I consider myself having a degree from the streets. Right. And not from a university, even though I did go to a university later on. I was a streetwise brother, and I was a younger brother. But my big brother turned me on to the book, Malcolm X. He told me to read it. When I read it, I was the changed person. It's simple as that, because I saw myself in some of the things Malcolm was going through. Of course, I didn't hit my head as hard as Malcolm did going through some of the things he went through, but I did go through some of the same things. So Malcolm, to me, is the shining prince, and one that we really need to check out. Now, let's talk about Lumumba and Fanon. But I want to talk about them from a different perspective. I know that everything they contributed was powerful, no question, and we need to study them. Let's deal with the spiritual aspect, though. First of all, 1925. I don't know whether many of y'all know, brothers, in Jicho La Kimbunga, that I studied numerology.
Yeah, I know.
I know you know, Peter, but 1925 is a 9.
Yeah.
And my life path is a 9. And when studying numerology, and I saw that 1925 was a significant year that Lumumba was born and Malcolm, and at that time, I didn't even know Fanon was born at that time, but Malcolm and Lumumba. Later on, I found that out by reading Fanon like everybody else, and saw his contributions. But I call that, and before I was in the UNIA, I was in the Sons and Daughters of Africa, and I'm an Obibini. They call Obibini a son. First you're an Omawali, and then an Obibini is a son who's returned home. So I was with that group, the Sons and Daughters of Africa. The triangular tree of those three men is critical in terms of geographically. One born on the continent, one born in North America, and one born in the southern parts of Western Hemisphere. That's significant to me. And then you look at the 9, all three of them were born in a universal 9 year. Well, 9 represents the completion of man and woman in terms of numerically or numerology. What I saw when I started hearing about Patrice Lumumba, and by the way, I never got to hear Malcolm personally or see Malcolm, but I was at the March on Washington in 1963 at my age then. My stepfather took me, but my stepfather grew up in Philadelphia, and he always talked about Malcolm. But he took me to the King thing. So the point I'm making is that my family ingrained me to keep me from running through the street life to read. And so not only did I read Malcolm, and of course everybody read the autobiography, and that's very important. and then I got to reading other things, I found Garvey. So I'm going to leave it at that for the sake of time. But for me, if you want to know who you are as a Black man in the world, you got to study Malcolm X. You should study Patrice Lumumba, who both of them gave their lives for us to move towards sovereignty. I used to call Lumumba the Malcolm X of Africa.
yeah, me too. That's how I look at him.
As I read, I started seeing Malcolm X, the Lumumba of America. Yeah. So I didn't see them two at all. And then Frantz Fanon, I learned so much through reading his books, like one of them right here. This one right here, and the other ones that Baba Akili mentioned. And believe me, reading makes a ready man, as Marcus Garvey taught us, and woman. But a writing man and woman makes a ready man and woman. And I've become a writing man and woman. So I'm an obedient servant to our ancestors. And by the way, Senghor means descendant of the ancestors. So my cosmic assignment is to follow Malcolm, follow Lumumba, follow Garvey, follow all the gigantic women, and to make sure that when I'm no longer on this physical plane, people say Senghor gave his all and he left us a legacy. But I was following my ancestors. So I say that I'll stop right there and let some of the reasoning of our young brother. By the way, Sam, I think, is going to come on the way. Sam apologized for being late because he had something happening with the youth, but he's trying to come, I think. So I'll stop right there.
All right. Yeah, Baba Akili also had to go. He had another appointment, so we'll be continuing forward. But Baba Ajay, you have the floor, brother.
Thank you. So for the sake of brevity, I'm not going to address all three of the brothers. I'm going to address the brother that had the singular greatest impact in my life, and that's Brother Malcolm X. I was blessed to have a dad who was very conscious and militant and Pan-African and nationalist. And he taught me from a very young age the basics about African civilizations and Black resistance and so forth. But he also, growing up in Harlem, got to see Malcolm speak quite often as a young man himself. And so he told me a lot about Malcolm. Of course, at that time, I was born in 65. At that time, there were no books for kids on Malcolm. Now there's a plethora. So all I had was my father's stories. And of course, I would see a few documentaries when I got a little older. But one day when I was grounded for something I don't remember I did, my mother, I couldn't go anywhere. So I'm trying to find stuff to do in my room. And I stumbled upon a very withered copy, my father's copy of Malcolm X Speaks. I was very excited because now I got to really read what Malcolm said himself. And over that course of that weekend, I made a commitment that I wanted to be like him in some way. I knew I wasn't going to be Malcolm X, but I wanted to be like him in some way. And so it had a very personal effect on my life in tangible ways. In my hood in Harlem, there was crack, AIDS, gang warfare. Every block had a gang. It was very tough, man, to survive. And Malcolm and trying to be like him kept me away from all of that. I walked to the best of my ability, a straight path. I took my studies very seriously. And those who went to high school with me know that in the cafeteria, I'd be holding court at our table, teaching people about Malcolm X. It was crazy. Brother Malcolm is the reason that I became a student leader in college. Brother Malcolm is the reason that I changed my name in 1990 legally. Brother Malcolm is the reason why I named my daughters Nubia and Zakiya African names. He's the reason why when we became disenchanted with the school I taught in, myself and two other teachers left that school and started a new middle school that's still standing. It's 25 years old, called Knowledge and Power Preparatory Academy. And what is the motto? Education is our passport to the future. So for me, everything that I try to do politically is in some way, shape, or form a credit to my dad and obviously my Jegnas. Oh, and I should say this. One of my greatest Jegnas, Dr. James Turner, told a story that he was a young guy and he was very smart, but he was in the streets and you know, back then every block had gangs when he was growing up. And he said his family was telling him he should go to college, but he listened. He would come uptown and hear Malcolm speak, right? And he got the impression that Malcolm didn't like, you know, going to the white man's colleges, right? This type of thing. So one day he got the chance to actually get Brother Malcolm's attention after an actual speech, and he said, "Listen, my name is so and so, and they say I'm smart, but I'm in the streets, and you know they want me to go to college, but I know you wouldn't advocate for that, right?" He said, Malcolm interrupted him and said, "Brother, one of my greatest regrets is that I did not go to college." He said, "If you have the intelligence to go to college, you go to college. And you take, because most of what they got there, they took from us anyway." He said, "So you go there, you take that knowledge, and you go back to your community." Now, that young man became Dr. James Turner, the founding director of the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell. When other universities in this country were shutting Dr. Ben out, were shutting Dr. Clark out, Dr. James Turner gave them classes to teach at Cornell and made sure that they had a living and that they were given the respect they deserve. At I think in Tanzania, I forget the particular Pan-African Congress, he was one of the conveners of that.
Yeah.
So it just goes to show you all the people that he touched. So for me, it's very personal.
Sixth Pan-African
I'm going to end with that.
It was the Sixth Pan-African Congress that you're speaking about. James Turner was there because our brother David Horn was there. I knew a couple other people that were there. It was James Turner there then. Powerful, powerful ancestor.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the reflection, brother. Brother Black Megas, what's your reflection, brother?
Man, to start off with Malcolm, I'm a New Orleanian by a native New Orleanian, which is kind of goes into even the person I brought forth, Judah P. Benjamin. He was a Jewish slave owner in New Orleans, where he did all of his stuff. It wouldn't be, you know, growing up in New Orleans, right? I lived through the Bush Brown massacre, known as Hurricane Katrina, which incorporated the Rex 84, which is a Marshall Plan to round people up. The King Alfred Plan, which was a CIA plan to exterminate Black people, or African people, I should say, worldwide. And you know, even to be born, I made it through Margaret Singer's, all of us, Margaret Singer's the Negro Project, which was, and this is something that we don't talk about, and what I want to bring forth with talking about our enemies is how our enemies create enemies with our own skin tone. The Negro Project, in cooperation with the help of W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary McLeod Bethune, Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr., Howard Dean, Dr. Kelly Miller. These are things that we don't know. We don't understand how we have people with our own skin tone who, whether they knew what our enemies had planned for us or not, they were useful tools to our enemies towards our own destruction. And because of that, you know, growing up in New Orleans, I would look at pictures of Martin Luther King all over the place. And I would hear "I Have a Dream." I would hear all of this lovey-dovey stuff. And as people believe New Orleans to be a melting pot, it is not. It is in the 80s, it was still one of those, hey, there's a fine line and we know where we belong on that side of town. And so I always grew up with everything is black and white. And I had substitute elementary school teachers, Black men, who would say things about Malcolm, but I was never taught who Malcolm was. It wouldn't be until middle school that I would get an inkling of who Malcolm was. And I was like, why am I not hearing about this man? Why am I hearing, you know, we have to accept violence, we have to be transgressed upon by others? No, you hit me, I'm gonna hit you back. You know, so looking at all of the anger that I know that built up inside of me. It was when I read a book by our brother Nathan McCall, Make Me Want to Holler. reading that book really opened my eyes into the fact that there is a systemic issue in this country, that it makes no sense that he grew up in a time different than me, in an area different than me, yet I still had the same exact problems as him. That shows that there is a systemic issue there at play. And when I wrote him, I was surprised that he actually wrote me back 2 years later, as I was actually going into the United States Army. And he wrote, reading my words and saying that he sensed the anger and frustration that I had in me, and that I needed to find a way to direct that so that it wouldn't eat me up. It would be 4 years later, that the murder of Trayvon Martin, that anger had reached its height. And that would led me to where I am now, with the knowledge that I gain now, and really studying what Malcolm really stood for, really seeing that he was unafraid to call out our enemies, to go after our enemies. And these were the things that we see people of our own skin tone would eventually come back to disparage this man's name and say that he deserved nothing but death. That coming from the exact people who he supposedly worked with. And I'm gonna call it out. Louis Farrakhan said that this man deserved to die. Muhammad Ali even said he deserved to die, though he retracted those words once it actually happened. We have to understand the important role of all skin folk ain't kinfolk in this fight, in this struggle. And that's what Malcolm represented to me, is that though we go forth to fight for African liberation, we don't do so in a stupid way. It's a lesson I had to learn the hard way, after ironically, or poignantly, I should say, because I don't like using the word ironically, because it actually means the opposite. Poignantly, watching the film The Spook Who Sat by the Door. And we all know how that film ends. So if anybody gets in the way between you and your freedom, you have to be able and ready to destroy that. Malcolm was willing to die for that. When we look at Patrice Lumumba, he was fighting, again, the origins of the Jewish imposition on Congo from Leopold. You know, at first Leopold created the Congo Independent. I can't remember exactly what it was called back in the late 1800s. What happened was other European nations seen what he was doing and said, we want a part of Africa ourselves. And they started sending expeditions there to claim African land of their own. So what did Leopold do? He said, well, I don't want these people infringing upon my part of Congo. So he got into the ear of France and Germany to say, hey, we can have trade in Africa. And he got with Otto von Bismarck, who from Germany, who would then call the 1884-1885 Berlin Conference, which we know was used to then divide Africa into territorial parts for different European nations. These are the origins of the struggles that led to Patrice Lumumba's uprising, not uprising, but his coming into African warriorhood, his fighting for his people. That was his greatness. There's nothing I can say that can really exemplify what he did. But what we don't talk about is the detractors and those who, again, skin folk who came to sabotage him, who destroyed him, who would eventually humiliate him on a public stage and execute him. And yet somehow these people get to live long lives, get to become rich. And we do nothing to disparage these people and who they are and what they have done. As it comes to Frantz Fanon, I have not learned much of him except throughout recent years, but I will say that he also had those Jewish enemies, such as Hannah Arendt and a Adam Schatz, who disparaged his works to say that he should not be talking in a sense of violence. But why is it that the so-called Jewish people who had a supposed great amount of violence done to them and bloodshed spilled, which Frantz Fanon fought in the World War to save these people? How is it that these people who had great violence done unto them will then say a black man should not be advocating for violence when violence is done to him and his people? That is antithetical to the fight and plight of African people on this planet.
Right. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you. Shakara, build on it.
Yeah, I'm gonna start with Papa Lumumba, because I owe him a great debt. And the reason being is, so my father kind of comes into the Pan-African community in the 80s, in the 1980s in the UK. And at that time, you know, as there was everywhere else, you know, you had a Pan-African socialist tradition and you had a nationalist Pan-African tradition. The leading nationalist Pan-Africanist organization on the ground in the UK at that time was the Pan-African Congress movement. And interestingly, I mean, when I say, you know, to say that there are two strains, those strains, there's a lot of cross-fertilization between those two strains. And I say that because two of the leading lights who were responsible for the development of the Pan-African Congress movement are Mangaliso Sobukwe of Azania, South Africa, leader of the Pan-African Congress of Azania, and also Papa Kwame Ture, who visited the UK a number of times between the 1960s and the 1980s. And that became central to the development of a lot of Pan-African organizations. If you know anything about him, he was part of the socialist Pan-Africanist tradition. But the Pan-African Congress movement used to have Sunday meetings every Sunday. And so as a young, you know, budding Pan-Africanist, my father used to attend these meetings. And at some point, he was given the task of delivering a presentation on Patrice Lumumba. And as a result of his research, that is how I get my family name, Bandaka. Bandaka is actually the name of a region in the Congo. And my father learned about that region and that name while studying about Papa Patrice Lumumba, and decided to reclaim it as our family name when he was going through the process of discarding the European names and reclaiming African names. Bandaka in the Kikongo language is the name that he chose. And so I have the blessing of never having carried a Bakra slave master's name my entire life. And that was because my father wanted to make sure that he didn't hand that down to me. So before I was born, Bandaka is the name that's on my birth certificate. You know what I'm saying? So I have a lot to thank Papa Patrice Lumumba for, in terms of the inspiration that he provided to my father. And I'll come back to Papa Patrice Lumumba because I really kind of got to understand a lot about him. Well, I'll come back to that in a second. So that's give thanks for that first and foremost. Papa Omowale Malcolm X is the man, I would say, who really gave me my earliest proper understanding of what it meant to be an organizing revolutionary African outside of my family, you know, the organization that I was born into. Because he was the first one who I was able to study before I was reading seriously. Because there's so much interviews, there's so much speeches, there's so many documentaries. Yeah, so we grew up. There's a documentary that was released in the 1970s called Malcolm X, the Man in His Own Words. And that's a documentary, for those who are not aware, that starts off with Malcolm X's speeches interspersed with the Last Poets, Niggas Are Scared of Revolution. Yeah, and so you have a lot of Malcolm X speeches and quotations in that whole documentary. Grew up watching Malcolm X, 7 Songs for Malcolm. That's another documentary. And Malcolm X Make It Plain. That's another documentary. The Eyes on the Prize series. Yeah. In particular, the episodes that profile Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and Baba Kwame Ture. Yeah, that middle section. Yeah, we watched quite significantly. Had his speeches on videotape. You know what I'm saying? So he was the first man who, before I was reading seriously, I had a significant amount of the spirit of this man, just embedded in me from early. Yeah. I read the autobiography of Omowale Malcolm X before I read Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, and possibly before I read Message to the People. I did read Message to the People before I read Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. And so it was that spirit that really, through which I was really able to learn what it meant to be a freedom fighter, or organizer, and a leader of African people. And I'm indebted to that man. Yeah. For that reason. And then just his sincerity inspired me, not just the fire of his words and the clarity of his words, but the depth of his character. I really studied the character of Omowale Malcolm X, his honesty, and how that honesty led him to evolve as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a leader, as an organizer, how his political and economic and cultural philosophy evolved, particularly in the last year of his life with the development of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. And so I learned so much about, all of those things from Omowale Malcolm X, but to a significant degree as a young man, he became my exemplar of what it meant to be a man, of manhood. Yes, in general. Yeah. I measured my manhood by the extent to which, my character was as developed as I understood Malcolm X's to be. And so that there's that. But then one thing about him is that he always spoke about Papa Patrice Lumumba.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that Patrice Lumumba is the greatest African to ever walk the continent, or something, or worse to that effect. Yeah. And was vexed about the circumstances of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and was scathing about the sellouts on the ground, Moe Shombe in particular, on the ground in the Congo, who were complicit with the Americans and the Belgians and the French, and told the line, and the line that resulted in the assassination of Papa Patrice Lumumba. But not only them, he was scathing of the role that the American government played in the assassination of Papa Patrice Lumumba, and the fact, and not just the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, but the attack against the Simba rebellion that rose up after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, and exposing the role of the American government, yes, in that regard. And so he was an example then, of fearlessness and the need for us as Africans around the world to connect beyond national borders, yes, for the sake of African liberation. Patrice Lumumba was important because, nationalist, socialist again, we loved, Osagyefo for Kwame Nkrumah, but because we were partial to Africans who didn't adopt a Marxist lens, Patrice Lumumba became highly venerated among us. In fact, this book, and it's good to have activist parents, because you have access to books that are no longer in print. But this book right here, it was stapled to my Garvey Lumumba Malcolm, Black Nationalist Separatist, by Mama Shana Maglambayan, who was an elder mama from Cuba, used to be married to Baba Carlos Moore. And so, was exposing a lot of the racial dynamics in Cuba at that time. But this book is, was central. Most nationalists of that period would have this book. Yeah. And you can see Baba Senghor affirming the thing.
That's about
what I'm saying. But this book was essential to my own, formative, like my young adulthood, in terms of understanding the thing. But Lumumba and his uncompromising stand against not just colonialism, but neocolonialism. Yes. And what I learned young about the fact that it was him who, when the King of Belgium came and evoked the spirit of the demon, the devil, King Leopold, at the independence ceremony of the Congo, it was Patrice Lumumba who rose up and went into spiritual warfare against the devil spirit of King Leopold, and said that the people of the Congo will never forget the scars that have been inflicted upon our backs, by these demons, and said that we are going to make the Congo the center of the sun's radiance for the entire for the liberation of the entire African continent. And I was always inspired by his resolve and the strength of his resolve to continue fighting. And finally, I'll say on this, the last thing that he ever wrote was a letter to his wife when his assassination was imminent. And I remember reading that letter when I was very young, and it had a major impact upon me, because everything in that letter was love for his wife and his children, but imploring them to continue the fight. And it amazed me that a man who was in that particular condition at that time could have written a letter that had so much love in it, not just for his family, but his people at large. And so I've always had a strong connection to Papa Patrice Lumumba. And that's partly why my fire when it comes to the Congo is so thoroughly ignited. We don't compromise. We understand what our people in the Congo have suffered for well over a century and continue to suffer right now. And we don't joke with that. We don't joke with that. And I've always likened the Congo on the continent to Haiti in the Americas. If you want to really understand what these demons are doing, I think you can go a long way just by studying those two nations alone. And Frantz Fanon is somebody that I came to really understand more about, in my young adulthood, principally through reading Wretched of the Earth. He was somebody who they declare, landed on the more socialist line, although I've come to see more nuances in that as I've gotten older. At the same time, he's a pioneer in the sense of the fact that he was one of the early ones who was looking at colonialism in terms of its psychological impact. He's a psychiatrist. As our brother Black Magus has said, he actually enters the political scene fighting as a colonized subject of France. And eventually, he as he's fighting in the French army, the wickedness of French colonialism is being exposed to him. And he writes a letter back to his family and saying, if he dies on the front lines fighting for France, dude, please do not allow them to say that I died fighting for any great cause. Yes, on behalf of any great people, because he realized the level of their wickedness, at that time. And so eventually, he writes and he works in various different roles on behalf of the French, but then he writes and basically disavows them. And enters a revolutionary fight in Algeria. All kinds of contradictions there as far as Black nationalism is concerned. But understanding the significance of his work, nonetheless, in terms of looking at psychology and psychiatry embedded it with a cultural foundation. And his work in terms of understanding colonialism as violence and the role of armed resistance on the part of the colonized is essential work for our understanding as African people in this day and age. And so I give thanks for all of these bubbers. From my political inclinations, I'm particularly aligned with Papa Omowale Malcolm X and Papa Patrice Lumumba, but we love and respect Frantz Fanon nonetheless for his contribution on behalf of our people.
I say, thank you, Brother Sakurai. This has been a great conversation, y'all, so far. I wanna just hold on. I wanna pull up where we are so far in the agenda. The conversation is great so far, guys. All right.
Sorry, Chief. Sorry, Chief. I'm not sure if you saw, but Baba Aji did want to make a comment.
Okay, yeah, sure. Go ahead, Baba Aji. No problem. I didn't see it.
in the spirit of Brother Malcolm, I'll be brief because, you know, Malcolm respected time very much.
Absolutely.
He said that he actually judged a man or woman by if they wore a watch or not. If they didn't wear a watch, he didn't respect them, because he said any man or woman that's serious will be serious with their time and their management of time. So in that spirit, I'll be brief. The comment, the thread, whatever you call it, is bubbling right now. And you know, when we talk about great historical figures, there's a tendency to try to legislate where or who or what made them. And I'm not in the spirit of trying to check nobody. I'm not coming from that angle, just to broaden the perspective on it. Some people say the nation made him. Well, we know historically he had Garveyite parents. We know historically that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad was in the UNIA.
True.
We know then that we have to, when he goes into gets to the streets, goes to prison, he is reacquainted to his Garveyite teachings to some degree. So the nation has a tremendous impact, but understand that prior to his exposure to the Nation of Islam, he gets a lot of his fundamental teachings from his parents, and i.e. Marcus Garvey. We want to give everybody their proper respect, but we want to be historically accurate. We want to have historicity, because without that, our politics would be off. You know, that's important. And that's all I'm going to say on that, Brother Sangor.
Yeah, you know, thank you for saying that. But you know, I had the opportunity of studying under Lieutenant Sheikh Sharif, who worked with Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and Sheikh Sharif was really one of the major people that was written, wasn't put in the movie, but he had tremendous influence with Malcolm. Well, Sheikh Sharif and Honorable Charles L. James met each other, and we had that very conversation you just shared. Malcolm was rooted in Garveyism. Also, I've had the opportunity of meeting several of Malcolm's daughters, particularly the elder, Attila. Mm. And Attila met met Julius Garvey at the same time when we were at a big meeting in LA, and the two Garvey families had that discussion. Attila made it clear that they were raised in Garveyism. And it's no slight to the teachings that Malcolm got from the Nation of Islam, but it's clearly, she made it clear the little family was nurtured as Garveyites. And you're absolutely right about Elijah Muhammad. I mean, for many years, people tried to deny that fact, but the fact maintains that he too was in the Detroit UNIA, ACL. I just wanted to clarify that because I actually talked to brothers, and I also met Ella Collins, and she also confirmed the same thing.
But let me just say they still do deny that fact. Yeah, at the same time,
we don't deny it.
I know. There are squatters that deny it. At the same time, there are many debates to have around the dynamics. These dynamics, yeah, that to me is not one of them. I think we can. As Garveyites, we know and understand that, and even Wilfred, the big brother that I mentioned earlier, said, you know, when he joined the nation, it was because of its resemblance to the Garvey movement, right? So there's no doubt about these things. At the same time,
even Minister Farrakhan has said the same thing. So
right, you know what I'm saying?
Garvey meeting,
right, you know what I'm saying?
Garvey.
At the same time, it takes nothing away from us to give respect and understand the fact that a lot of Papa Omowale Malcolm X's disciplines as an organizer came from his training in the Nation of Islam. He himself said that even when he had left, yeah, he acknowledged what he got from the nation, and to be quite frank, a lot of those disciplines are disciplines that he helped to evolve, yeah, and to build upon.
Well, that's why I mentioned Sheikh Sharif, because a lot of people don't remember Sheikh Sharif when he's the one that housed Elijah Muhammad when he came to Washington D.C. He's an ancestor, of course, now. So I just wanted to say that because in 1983, Sheikh Sharif and Charles L. James, we sat together.
Absolutely.
We sat together.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, go
forward.
Hey,
Baba, you know, Baba, you know, the thing about it is like, I'm just thinking here as you guys are talking, is that Malcolm, he took a moral stance in public that men don't typically take of any race of any time. He felt as though he was saying what needed to be said and doing what was needed to be done to protect the integrity of the black woman. Malcolm taught it, and then he practiced it when it was time for him to stand up for his principles. So that's why we say Malcolm was our manhood, because a man really stand up for his own principles, even if it kills him. He stand for his principles. And Malcolm was that in the flesh for us. And so, you know, I think that speaks even to the nature of internal oppression within the movement. You'll find this tradition of womanizing as well within the movement that usually the brothers don't talk about, but we need to talk about it if we're really going to appreciate Baba Omowale Malcolm X.
Talk about it.
That was the principle. That was the principle that he stood on. And then at the same time, I'll say, well, even while we stand on that, let me say that, yes, Malcolm was a Garvey cub, born in 1925. Malcolm was born as Garvey's prison cell was closing within a Garveyite household. And no matter what, Malcolm followed his family into the Nation of Islam. Right. He didn't follow Elijah Muhammad into he went where his family was at, because that's what was most reflected at the time of what the UNIA was. They never really left the front lines of the Black nationalist movement. The organization changed. And I believe Malcolm was more of the Black nationalist within the Nation of Islam than a lot of the people and the brothers and sisters who was in the Nation of Islam. So even you can hear Malcolm's political line very sharply Black nationalist, very sharply Garveyite, even as a minister of Elijah Muhammad. And then I also say that if we want to talk about the womanizing of our leaders, we would have to disqualify 90% of them. That's what I would say. And so it's not fair for us. It's not fair for us to do that because, because at that time, our enemies, COINTELPRO, was using that very contradiction that Elijah Muhammad had to divide our nation. They was using that one contradiction to divide the loyalty of African men and women who had already rehabilitated themselves and were in the ranks of the Black nationalist revolution within America. Making Elijah Muhammad a pedophile, making him whatever they made him out to be, it was an attack on the whole stability of the general movement. But it also unleashed a lot of that pent up revolution that was within it. So I can never knock the transition that the Nation of Islam is for us as Black Americans, particularly fighting for our national liberation within that country. A lot of our militancy, a lot of our dietary habits, a lot of our respect. Hey, brother, peace, brother. We still greet the same way in various movements. The Nation of Islam is one of the most influential movements in the world. If you really understand the caliber of brothers and sisters that the Nation of Islam has created. And none of that is possible without the brilliance of Baba Elijah Muhammad. That man was one of us. That man was one of us. And he had his contradictions. And we continue to have those same contradictions. And we have to learn from that. We have to learn even from his weaknesses. And we have to be honest about Malcolm as well. A lot of people will say, well, damn, Malcolm, this the dude that put you on. It's happening right now with this Big Meats, Little Meats thing with 50 Cent. Little Meats is looking crazy. You know what I mean? And so it's a thing where people will say, I thought you was my brother, man. You ain't supposed to tell our secrets, you know? And that's what we deal with in the movement. We know our brother's secrets. And we got to stand on our principles as well within that. So Malcolm was definitely the man of the hour in that sense. And if we want to talk about, you know, promiscuity or whatever like that, we got to look at even the way that Martin Luther King is held up despite his sexual transgressions. And then he's appreciated even by white people. But Black nationalists ourselves, who we can directly see how we benefited from Elijah Muhammad and his sacrifice for our people, we can't give his work the same appreciation. And it's a backwards thing. It's almost like a double-edged sword, no matter way it is. But I just want to say that at a very important time in our struggle, Elijah Muhammad was the leader that we needed at the time.
Absolutely. Can I just add something to that very quickly? I know we got to move on here, but the reality is that we can often. I am somebody who 9 times out of 10 when I'm teaching on Malcolm X, I'm teaching about OAAU Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know,
that's just the right.
That's right.
That is the tradition that man upholds. Yeah, and I find that whatever happened between Omawale and Elijah Muhammad and between the Nation of Islam tends to be a barrier to us truly appreciating what the man was dealing with, with the development of the OAAU. And I want to encourage brothers and sisters not to get hung up on the disagreement and the fracture, because it's the most sensationalist element of that thing. Yeah, we need to appreciate what was taking place and the moves that Omawale Malcolm X was making internationally, and not allow the distraction to become a deterrent, for us properly understanding that. Especially because of the fact that the entirety of the disagreement with the nation did not have to do with the womanizing. There was more to it than that. Omawale Malcolm X was having issues in terms of the political direction of the Nation of Islam from before. Yes, exactly. He wanted there to be a more politically involved posture. He wanted there to be greater connections with Africans internationally and so on and so forth. And he was having trouble within the movement, not just from Elijah Muhammad, and sometimes not even at all from Elijah Muhammad, but from the organizational infrastructure. Yes,
absolutely,
that was around in the nation that he was having difficulty with. And so a lot of those challenges were political. They were not personal in the immediate.
Excellent point.
And so we have to understand the thing holistically in that regard. And if we understand where Omawale Malcolm X was going in the last year of his life, it will put a lot of that into proper context for us.
I agree.
And we'll be understanding, the more important aspects of those debates, and not just the sensationalism, that
something though, Shakara? His last year, the thing was asking him questions related to the Nation of Islam and the affairs of Elijah Muhammad, particularly his personal private affairs in his house and his relations in public. The CIA and the FBI would literally ask him a question about the personal private life of Elijah Muhammad in front of the camera, and Malcolm would have the decision to say no comment or comment, and Malcolm would comment. And so that was the
eventually. I have to say eventually, because for a long time he didn't say anything.
Yeah, I think that was the environment he was moving around in, and at the same time, not to be a moral judge of any character within it, because I wasn't there. The reality is that I can understand the heavy tension there, because Malcolm was a force to be reckoned with, and any separation of him was going to be a split of the power. If you can understand what I'm saying within the movement, but a lot of people was going whichever way Malcolm was going. The OAAU was stumped out before it even had the opportunity to catch a fire. And you can only imagine how well the diaspora would be organized in the Americas right now had the OAAU been able to have the leadership of Malcolm. So the way it was going and the way it ended up is one thing, but I know that within that last year, the biggest crisis in Malcolm's life was directly connected to the private sexual relations of Elijah Muhammad, directly connected. And there was other reasons, but I think that was the spark. I think that was the hidden thing that was feared even within the nation. I don't know, but just for me.
Yeah.
But it was also personal, because they would ask him questions about that man's private life in public, in a way to spark fires between the groups.
May I add something real quick, Chief?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll be quick. This is a lot of our history and politics has to involve nuanced thinking. It can't be too all the way to the left, all the way to the right. In saying that, this is what I'm trying to say. No, we should not get stuck on all the negativity of our leaders and movements. However, we must see them as teachable moments. Don't get stuck on it and your whole meetings talking about it and people fighting over it. But It raises the question. It raises a question. How do we define ethics in our movement? Malcolm was a great, not just political leader, he was an ethical leader. You can actually judge your life by saying, what would Malcolm do? How would Malcolm respond? That means he's an ethical leader. So no, we shouldn't harp on it and stay on it all day, but we should be, when we go through this history, we should be analytical, and it should be helping us to reframe some things and to rethink some things so that our forward motion is a little bit smoother. We should be learning lessons. But I agree, Shaka Ra, you are right and exact. I don't want people thinking that just because we look at things differently is always some type of disagreement, right? You're just giving nuance, right? We're adding layers to it. So we should always learn. That's very important, or we're going to keep making the same mistakes.
No doubt, no doubt. And, you know, these roundtables are styled as a building session. So we in the barbershop right now chopping it up in front of the people, man. So it's all good because, you know, Shaka Ra hit a point. I'm like, damn, I ain't think about that angle. I ain't see that. Then Baba hit one. Ooh, I got that. So I'm at school right now. This is educational opportunity for all of us, man. Shout out to everybody viewing. Keep having the conversation in the chat. We love it. It's great. The more we're able to engage in conversation with the people, the more conversation we're able to stimulate, the better job we're doing. So let's segue into the Rwanda Congo crisis. I don't know exactly what everyone understands about it, and I don't want to do it the way we did the other points where everyone gets to speak on it. But what I do want to do is I want to get a understanding of the origins and the nature and the current state of the Congo crisis, with Rwanda in particular, from Brother Shaka Ra, and then we can chop it up around that because I'm putting you on the spot, Shaka Ra, because I see your work. You are one of the stars in the movement that actually goes for the direct sources. Usually when you're talking, there's credibility behind it that you don't get credit for, but you actually do the work. And also, Brother Sam, both of y'all have the spirit of Mumia to me. Mumia wanted our people to know and understand using the media. And so, you know, in support of all the work, I think the best person among us to really give even us a proper understanding of the crisis so we can have a brief dialogue about it is you, brother. So can you give us like the elevator pitch, like, you know, the quick executive summary?
Shaka Ra, Mike.
Right. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Shaka Ra's mic is not happening.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for that. I'll try my best, Chief. It's kind of impossible to really understand what is taking place in the Congo without going back to Patrice Lumumba and the fact that he was assassinated principally because he wanted the resources of the Congo to serve the interest of African people in the Congo and around the world. And so at that time, there's a company called UNIA who was waxing itself rich off of the resources of the Congo in various different resources. At the time, uranium was a significant resource because it was the uranium that was being used in atomic bombs. And so a significant amount of the uranium that America used in the bombs that it dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a significant amount of that uranium came from the Congo. And so, you know, you have rubber, you have tin, copper, and so on and so forth. And so UNIA was funding the Moise Shombes and the Joseph Mobutus, who were responsible for the assassination of Papa Patrice Lumumba, the assassination of Pierre Molele, who was one of the leaders of the Simba Rebellion, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And so there's always been a battle in the Congo because they understand that the liberation of the Congo, especially in that era of heightened Pan-African energy, was going to fuel a situation in which not only their political leaders, but their corporate leadership would have no means with which to act on the African continent as neocolonizers, yeah? And so Joseph Mobutu was installed in the Congo in the 1960s and backed and supported by France, Belgium, and America for 32 years. That takes us up to 1997, brothers and sisters, yeah? From 1965 officially to 1997 was his presidency, although he was kind of ruling from 1961 really in the shadows, yeah? In 1994 in Rwanda, the Rwanda genocide happens. And the Rwanda genocide is a conflict that takes place as a result, again, coming out of Belgian colonialism. Rwanda gets its independence in 1960. And whereas they ruled through a group of Africans, now the group of Africans that dominate in the Congo are in Rwanda are referred to as the Hutu and the Tutsi, but they're both Rwanda peoples. In other words, they speak the same language. Yes, at a certain point, and they have literally basically the same culture, apart from one group is are considered to be pastoralist and dealing with cattle principally in their culture, and the other is considered to be agriculturalist. Yeah, Hutu being the agriculturalist, Tutsi being the pastoralist. The Hutu are the majority, the overwhelming majority. The Tutsi are a minority, but the Belgians govern Rwanda through Tutsi leadership. Yeah, and so as a result of that, the Hutu were suppressed. And so when it came to independence, the Hutu had a movement that was seeking to overthrow what was referred to as Tutsi supremacy. Yes, in that regard. And so in that context of independence, the Belgians switched allegiance and gave their allegiance to the Tutsi. And so in that dynamic, depending on who the Belgians were supporting, atrocities were committed against the other group of African in that regard. And so that created an ongoing fracture between Hutu and Tutsi that manifested itself now in what became the Rwanda genocide in 1994, between April and July 1994. We're not going to get into the details of the Rwanda genocide, except to say that it is cast as a genocide of Hutu against Tutsi, when the actual reality is much more complex than that. Yeah, but the reason why it was cast as a genocide of Hutu versus Tutsi is because at that time the American government and the forces of global white supremacy in general were heavily invested in a stool pigeon who stood on the scene, a puppet, a sellout who stood on the scene, named Yoweri Museveni. And in the 1980s, in the armed forces of who is the president of Uganda at this moment in time, it has been since the 1980s. At that time, in the 80s, one of the members of the armed forces in Uganda was a man by the name of Paul Kagame, who was a Tutsi man, refugee from Rwanda, who fled because of a lot of the fractures that I've already mentioned between the Hutu versus the Tutsi at that time. And so at some point, Kagame leads a military incursion back into Rwanda, to basically in terms that he might use, liberate the Tutsi from Hutu dominance, yeah, at that time. Now, the Rwanda genocide happens. In 1994, there's a whole Western support of Rwanda after it, because they put out the propaganda that it happened because the West, in particular in America, failed to intervene in the conflict. And so there's a lot of backing that Rwanda has from that time up until now. Fast forward to 1997, Mobutu, who was backed by France and Britain and America for 32 years, as I've already mentioned, is now no longer useful to those interests anymore, because Mobutu was once useful partly because he was anti-communist. And so the USSR had fallen, but Mobutu and his atrocities became far more apparent, yeah. In that regard, it was a bit more difficult for them to keep a lid over the atrocities that Mobutu was committing against the people of Congo during that time. So they needed to get rid of Mobutu. They used the Museveni in Uganda, and Kagame, who now becomes the president of Rwanda, and they come together with a force that is led by Laurent Kabila in the Congo. Laurent Kabila is a fighter who actually fought in the Simba Rebellion in the 1960s. And so he was always campaigning against Mobutu. And so they bring him, Museveni and Kagame into the Congo in 1997. And they join forces with Kabila to get rid of Mobutu. But what happens is, after a while, Kabila gets annoyed about what he refers to as foreign militaries in the Congo. A year later, in 1998, he tries to get rid of the foreign militaries in the Congo, and among those foreign militaries are the Rwandan military. That kicks off another Congo crisis in 1998. In 1998, Kagame sends forces into the Eastern Congo under the pretext that he is protecting Hutus who are being violently aggressed against in Tutsis who have been violently aggressed against in the Eastern Congo. Cut a long story short, the Rwanda genocide creates a lot of refugees, and a significant number of those refugees flee into the Congo. Those refugees are Hutu, those refugees are Tutsi. As a result of that incursion into the Congo, hundreds of thousands of people begin to die in the Congo. Between 1998 and 2010, the numbers of people dead are said to be over 6 million. But as those people are dying, what begins to start happening is that new forms of extraction are coming out of the Congo. The West is moving fast into the information age, which is characterized by the computer, the personal computer. And one of the primary minerals that is used in this regard is a mineral called coltan. As in all our phones, all our laptops, and everything like that. And the Congo holds some estimated 60% of the world's reserves, brothers and sisters, in relation to coltan. Yeah. And so from that time up until now, the Congo crisis has been facilitated, particularly in minerally rich areas of the Congo, and millions have perished as a result. And the issue where Rwanda is concerned is that after the Rwanda genocide, Rwanda and Kagame in particular was put forward to the world as this new leading economy, the bastion of democracy and free market economics on the African continent. And so really, he's servicing Western interests on the African continent. And in this instance, the Rwandan military and the militias who are related and funded by the Rwandan government, namely in this particular instance, the M23, basically commandeer minerally rich areas and areas of significant mines in the Eastern Congo. For example, Goma, which is a city that is being taken over now. And then companies, like Crystal Ventures, which is a Rwandan company, come and access those resources, and then those resources get sold to Western corporations like Tesla and Apple and Microsoft and so on and so forth to fuel the computer age. So what we're seeing is the continuation of neocolonialism effectively, and African lives in the Congo are perishing as a result. And that's a very, very brief overview. There's so much more that could be said, but I hope that suffices. It's even longer than I was intended to give it, Chief, but I hope that suffices.
That was perfect, brother. That was literally like perfect. I just want to open up the mic, Baba Senghor.
I think Shaka Rod did an excellent job of bringing a summary of some of the things going on. But based on time, I don't think I want to get too into that as much as I want to talk a little bit about the next topic. So I'll defer if somebody else has something they want to add to what Shaka Rod said, because I'd like to share on the last topic around the so-called pardon and talk about our position in terms of exoneration. So if Baba Ajay has something to add, Baba Ajay, that's where I'm at.
Chief, allow me to just for the sake of clarity, that the reason why this is a significant issue right now is because the M23, which is a militia in Rwanda, recently took over the city of Goma, and the trade routes, through which resources are being extracted, and so that was in January, like literally the day after Trump was inaugurated. So that's the reason why it's happening. It's a significant issue right now. As a result of this, hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced or redisplaced. Upwards of the last figure that I had was 3,000. I'm sure it's much higher than that now. Have been killed in that particular region as a result of all of this. And the M23 is said to be on the move towards Kinshasa to take over the capital city. They're not there yet, but that's the speculated goal. So that's why it's particularly news at the moment. Anybody else who wants to come through on this?
Right. Baba IG, are they talking about the Congo and Rwanda and Harlem, man? Like, what's going on?
Listen, man, my brother Shakara broke that down so thoroughly that we'll never be able to put it back together again. I'd be a fool to try to add on to what that brother just dropped.
Yeah, man. So let's just do the best.
Can I add something in?
Yeah, Brother Megas. Yes.
Yeah,
sir.
just to be real quick on what Brother Shakara was talking about, especially when it comes to Kagame and the Rwandan crisis. Or in 2017, Benjamin Netanyahu got with a bunch of African leaders and announced that Israel will be making its great return back to Africa. I say this because we are now getting reports from generals on the ground that M23 has weapons that is foreign to the African continent. They have traced these weapons back to Israel. A lot of African scholars, especially like PLO Lumumba, has also come forth with espousing this same title when it comes to Kagame, calling him the modern day King Leopold II, because he is enacting the same exact things that Leopold did in that region. You look at the BlackRock, the private military group headed by Eric Prince. Eric Prince last year came forth and said nationally that Africa needs to be recolonized. Africa needs to be recolonized. That is something that people need to look up. Is Eric with a K, not with a C. If you look that up, you should be able to find that. So what we are looking at right now, I don't think is, and of course, it's never.
Sorry, bro. Not to interrupt you. Remember your point. I just want to correct you. You said Blackrock. You mean Blackwater?
Blackwater. Yes. Blackwater. I think that we need to greatly make our brothers and sisters on the continent aware. And I know we're going to get into the Sahel and the importance of what those brothers are doing, because we must start also teaching our brothers and sisters globally about the machinations of those who mean us no well, mean us no good whatsoever, and that it always comes from people who are not of our skin tone, more so than those who are.
Absolutely, Chief. Let me just embellish on the brother's point very quickly. And sorry, just to say the reason why the distinction between Black Rock and Blackwater is important is because there is a Black Rock, which is an investment corporation. It's one of the biggest ones, like Vanguard. Sorry, it's an asset management corporation, which is important. That also has a role in this Congo situation as well. They're two different institutions, so that's why it's important to make that distinction. But Bibi Netanyahu and Paul Kagame are good friends. Kagame is actually the first African leader, in fact, the first leader of any foreign nation to speak before APAC, the American-Israeli Political Action Committee in America. No other foreign leader has ever gone to America and fought and spoke before APAC before. And Paul Kagame became the first in the year that the brother just mentioned, 2017. Kagame has visited Israel, and Bibi Netanyahu has visited Rwanda as well. And yes, it is a fact that the Israeli government has bilateral agreements with the Rwandan government and supports Rwanda with technology and security, as well, including military aid. As well, brothers and sisters, and it is significantly rumored that a lot of the diamonds from the Congo go through Rwanda into Israeli hands in return for a lot of the weaponry that the Rwanda military and the M23 hold in the Congo. So those relationships are very, very significant, solidified. In fact, when our brother just mentioned the AU Israel trying to come back into the AU, when they did so, Kagame was the greatest champion. When Israel wanted to restore its observer status in the African Union, most of the African leaders were against it. Kagame was the one who was absolutely for it. And then the leader of Chad, who became the AU head after Kagame, later on actually installed them via like what you might call a executive order, but that's being debated in the AU at the moment, brothers and sisters. Yeah, but I'm just saying that relationship is very, very well solidified and established.
Right. That's it's been a great conversation. I've watched so much social media on the topic over the last year or two. You know, my heart goes out to the people of Congo. I believe everyone on this call has some Congolese ancestry. Absolutely. Somewhere down the line. You know, that's our motherland. If Congo is free, Africa is free. We pray Chief, for the people of Congo.
Allow me to say that if brothers and sisters want more in-depth discussion on this, we'll be speaking to our brother from the Congo, who lives in Ghana at the moment, Kambale Musavuli, on Wednesday the 26th. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the political economy of the Congo crisis. So brothers and sisters, do come through Wednesday the 26th of February from 8 p.m. GMT, that's UK time, which corresponds to 3 p.m. EST. Eastern time, yeah. So do come through. We'll be delving deeper into the companies that are involved, the governments that are involved, what their roles are, where resources are exchanging hands, you know, the media, and so on and so forth. We'll be going to it in a bit more depth.
Oh yeah. So we don't have the Negro world, but we do have Kimbunga media. You understand? We have the next best thing. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, you know, as you see, Brother Shakarai has been working around the clock to ensure that we get media directly from the sources of the people on the ground who share the ideology that we do. And that is like mining for diamonds. Shakarai, you're doing a great job, brother. Keep doing it. Yeah, man. So going right out of this discussion around Rwanda and Congo crisis, in the planning to this roundtable, we thought it necessary to go right from this into the AES setting new standards. Because even as I see what recently took place in the Congo with Rwanda forces backing rebel forces within the Congo, and just seeing this whole seizure of towns and this mayhem going on in the Congo, I'm thinking also in the back of my mind, but look what's happening in the Sahel. And the Sahel has become the standard. It has become the model. It has become the seed for the new Africa. And so now, because of the Sahel, because of the brothers and sisters of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, we now have a living Pan-African example of freedom fighters, of revolutionaries, of those who match the same spirit and ideology that we have articulated and we have lived up to in our own various locations throughout the diaspora in particular. So we now have not only one country, but 3 countries that's in the process of developing a single state. We have the beginning of a United States of Africa. in the Sahel happening right now. And you go to Central Africa and you see Rwanda backing rebel forces in the Congo, and you say, what is this? So just to juxtapose between the conversation that we just had about Rwanda and the Congo, the good conversation, let's talk about the new standards that the Sahel is setting. When we look at our brother Captain Ibrahim Traore, we see Thomas Sankara, we see Malcolm X, we see his influences, we see a little Garvey there. We see all the influences that influence us. We see a brother, we see a comrade. And when we see the president of Mali, Assimi Goïta, we see Sunjata Keita, we see the founder of a new empire, because that's how they perceive it themselves. The people of these nations are completely behind the revolution taking place in their countries. And their diplomats and their leaders have continuously made statements in the public, in the private, to reach out to the diaspora, to say, hey, come on home, let's get this thing popping. We need your help. And that conversation is ongoing, but let's talk about the AES and the setting of new standards in the context of the general African liberation struggle, but also in relationship to the previous discussion around Rwanda and Congo crisis. I yield, the mic is open.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Let me just say real quickly, you kind of set the stage, and I forgot about this stage, but this is important. I think the most important thing that I want to see other, I call them nation states connect in with what's going on right now. One of the things that I've saw happening, and you kind of put it the right way, Chief, it's the real move towards going for what Sheikh Anta Diop told us to do in terms of creating a federation, United African States. Right now, I don't see them in countries. I really don't. The Berlin Conference did that. So, but I'm hoping, and I'll do everything I can to spread the word for people to really check out what's going on, and to hope that not only West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, South Africa, and all of them take the lead, because you're absolutely right. Traore is definitely a manifestation of the spirit of Thomas Sankara. So I'll just leave it at that. Let everybody else chime in, because, action speaks louder than words. And what was recently done with so-called prisoners is cutting edge for everybody. Everybody should take notice. I mean, everything they're doing, not only in the three nation states, but what's happening in Burkina Faso with allowing the prisoners to step into agriculture is cutting edge. That's a message that everybody should take into consideration. I mean, we got a thing happening here in the DC area, and we're going to get into that discussion with so-called prisoners of war, political prisoners. Returning citizens have been doing a whole lot of things. And my brother, and I know I'm not going to get off the subject, but a good brother of mine just come out with a book. And this brother had a group called the Concerned Black Men. And he came out with a book called The Man, the Message, and the Mission. The murder capital, and I know we're going to get into this other discussion, but I'm tying it to what's going on in Africa, because we need to use the examples that are working there with brothers that come out that that were incarcerated, being able to farm. But the point I'm making is that this brother had 37 years, and thanks to God, he didn't end up doing all those 37. But he grew up in my era, and when we were doing stuff against the so-called establishment, we were robbing banks. That's what was happening in my era. Anyway, long story short, DC was looked at as the murder capital. This one year, they had over 485 murders. After the concerned men went into Simple City and addressed the issue of the packing young brothers that were packing Uzis, et cetera, and brought peace in those areas, the next year was 28. So anyway, my point to you is that people who are incarcerated or who have been incarcerated, Black men, tend to be able to come out and address issues that we're confronted with in the hood because they come from the hood. What I see happening in the Sahel states is an example of all prisoners being able to come out and address agriculture so that they turning their lives around from whatever they did, whether it was murder, stealing, whatever, and contribute to nation building by growing and going into the earth. The same thing can happen worldwide with our brothers who are incarcerated. And I know that's one of the topics, and I'm not trying to get ahead of us, but I think it's very important for us to look at nation building of what's going on in the West Africa right now as examples of that we can use. That sometimes we as a community, you know, we judge people who are making a mistake. We can't do that. What we got to do is redirect their energy. And Malcolm was a perfect example of that too. I mean, and many people who work with us with the UNIA are examples. I know I work with brothers who were incarcerated for 15, 10, 20 years, and they come out to be real men and come out to be contributors, raising their children. So my point is, we need to get everybody in the diaspora to see the examples of nation building that's taking place in those nation states. And so regardless of where we are, and in closing, last night, I was on a Zoom with brothers and sisters in Toronto, where we were addressing the economic issue, and they were talking about controlling land wherever you are. And of course, I didn't try to, my thing is Africa, of course, in terms of land, but wherever you are, you need to have ways and means of how you're going to start growing your own food. And for this example that they did with the prisoners, is showing you that the labor force could be people who you have locked up for whatever, and you can rehabilitate them by putting them in a position where they can work and go into the soil to grow food for the country. So to me, that is an excellent thing. Not to mention the fact of taking control and pushing all of the Yorugus out, which is critical. Because once you do that, you really get into nation building, self-reliance. So I'll stop right there. I didn't want to kind of take us off the point, but it's all relevant. Anything good going on for Black people anywhere needs to be an example for Black people everywhere.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you didn't take us off the point at all, Baba. We're talking about the brothers and sisters of the Sahel setting a new standard. 100 years ago, in 1925, the UNIA ACL was setting a new standard. When you go back to Nat Turner's rebellion, he was setting a new standard. That's what this struggle was about. Continuously setting a new standard until we get where we need to be. Right now, the AES has clearly, if it's a competition to set a high standard, they've clearly taken over the leadership of the movement in Africa as it relates to Pan-Africanists all around the world. Shakara, what you got to say about that, brother?
First of all, this is an issue that we haven't done as much on as I would like to on Kimbunga Media, and I'm gonna try and get like a Sahel, or I should say Alliance of Sahel correspondent, someone who can stay on the issue and just bring us regular updates. In saying that, however, in the meantime, I have been scheduled since last year, and it will be happening soon, to bring on representatives of a group of organizations who actually traveled to all of the Sahel states last year from the UK, and to share their experiences of what's happening on the ground. So I'm going to be doing that soon. Just to add to what brothers and sisters have said, and elders have said, it's also been reported that Burkina Faso is entering into electric car manufacturing. And so I'm interested in that, particularly. I'm not sure this is the case, but particularly if they are going to be utilizing solar energy. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I'll be interested to know and learn about those developments. And so, yes, sir.
Oh, just to add in on that real quick. I do believe that Captain Ibrahim Traore is trying to link up with the brother in Nigeria who created the RF energy. I can't remember exactly what he calls it, but you know, in Nigeria, there was a Nigerian brother who utilized RF frequencies to power devices, and he has now put that technology into motorcycles and cars. I believe Captain Ibrahim Traore is trying to get with that brother so that Nigeria can now be pulled into that Sahel. Well, in Straight Black Pride, we call it One Africa. The three kings of the Sahel region. And I believe that they're trying to now work with Nigeria so that they can get those get that technology for those cars that they're making.
Yeah, man.
No, give thanks for that, my brother. I will say that we have done a show on this before, and our guests were very skeptical. This was early in the development of the Sahel Alliance, and our guests were very skeptical, including my own father was very skeptical. You know, but wanted to be optimistic about what was happening, and that was their skepticism came from an analysis of the history of military takeovers on the African continent, even when the leaders appear to be saying all of the right things. Yeah.
Right.
Having said that, a year and a bit later, there is, I would say that there is good cause, yeah, for optimism that a lot of the things that they are saying and doing appear to be the right things to do and say. We have not heard the talk of collapsing the colonial borders for at least a generation. Even when we have heard it, very few people have done anything that would suggest that it's an actual implementable agenda. And it appears that at least with Goita, Traore, and Tiani, that there is serious efforts on the ground, yeah, to make that a reality, to make a new Mali or a new Songhai or a new Ouagadougou, and you know, as an African national, I'm partial to Ouagadougou as an African-centered individual. I'm partial to ancient Ghana, you know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But, whichever one it is, it's all good. If it's not, then I would prefer Mali than Songhai for other reasons, but that's another question for another time. The point I'm making is that they're doing significant work, and it's a lesson for us in the African world, especially those of us in the English-speaking African world, that we have to get over monolinguality, yeah. As a people, because all of these free nations, there are various different African indigenous languages that are spoken there, and the number one European language, colonial language that is spoken is French. And so there's a lot of communication. As somebody who's developing stronger relationships with French-speaking Africans at the moment, the need for us to learn even another colonizer language, yes, and certainly some African languages is very, very apparent right about now. And so in all of our independent African-centered educational institutions, we should all be teaching Wolof, we should all be teaching Bamleke, we should all be teaching Mande, and we should also be teaching French, brothers and sisters, because the teaching of French is going to be critical to this stage of our development as a Pan-African movement. You know, and I'm saying that because I know brothers and sisters in the French-speaking world are actively learning English at the moment just for crossing that colonial language barrier. So let us do what we need to do to organize at this moment in time.
Absolutely.
Can I add on to this, Chief?
Yes, sir. Please do.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say, I'm going off the script, that I am so proud of these brothers right here and this Jicho La Kimbunga brotherhood. All so politically literate, all dedicated and involved in our communities in real ways. I want to say that first and foremost. You know, I think about the conversation about the AES, what's going on with Mali and Burkina Faso and Niger. And I remember my father talking to me about how excited he was over Patrice Lumumba in the Congo and Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya and Julius Nyerere and all of these names of these African independence movement leaders, and how it gave a spark of hope to many of us new Africans here in the States, and I would imagine throughout the diaspora. And I was like, wow, I never really had that. I could never really connect to that personally. The only thing I could connect to in college was fighting against South Africa and apartheid and forcing the corporations to divest. But now I'm kind of feeling maybe what my father might have felt. I'm thinking that the formation of the AES and how they're moving might be the start of a new African independence movement. And that, to me, is an exciting prospect.
Yes, sir. Hey, brother IG, that's a great, I see it the exact same way. And that's why I think this new standards. This is literally a moment where new standards are being upheld. And now we can look at what's happening in Rwanda and Congo from a new standard. Say, hold up, how the AES watching these dudes fight over borders and over, colonial resources that they really just fighting over who gonna steal it and who gonna give it to the oppressor. But when you see the opposite happening, like Baba said, nation states. You see it happening right there where brothers are tearing down them borders. They begin a political movement that right now they have a central military with soldiers from all three countries. They have a confederacy on the way to a federation. We've never seen this. Even when we talk about back in the days with Nkrumah and them, they wanted to do this. Lumumba and Nkrumah, Toure, they signed a secret memorandum that they was going to cede their state sovereignty to a larger federated body. They was literally going to unify some of the African states then to get it started. And so when you see three understanding it, and you understand what has set us back all these 60 plus years, was that Pan-Africanism on the continent has been dominated by a Negro colonial class of puppets that preferred to keep the borders up and preferred to keep the nation states of the colonizers there. And now you see them rebelling against that very structure. They are fighting what we call neocolonialism right now. This is the era of neocolonialism. Kwame Nkrumah said this is the last stage of imperialism. That means Africa must get free through this process.
Absolutely.
So, this is Kimbunga. We are the whirlwind. We seeing this thing properly. The purpose for this round table is to help the people see it as well. Thank you, Baba Aji, for that contribution. The next conversation, if there's nothing else to add to that, is right on time as well. Our brother, Captain Ibrahim Traore, our brother Simi Goita, Tiani, they're under everyday threat. They done tried to kill this brother Ibrahim over 20 times. We're here talking about Lumumba. We're talking about Malcolm, men who we failed to protect as a people. That some people, even when they was walking around, didn't have any appreciation for them. And we left them vulnerable and exposed to attack. Sometimes you can help make a situation safer through your awareness and by knowing what to say and what to do. You don't have to get physical and get your hands bloody and dirty. Sometimes the pen is really mightier than the sword. The voice, it really does resonate. And so there's so much that we can do to chime in on the discussions. There's so much that we can do. Just like you said, Baba IG, this is like a throwback moment. This is an alley-oop from the ancestors. Like right now, while people are trying to separate us from our African origins, right now, while people are fighting to discredit Pan-Africanism and every leader that we admire and aspire to achieve, like, I mean, now is the moment. It's the time right now. It's time for us to really understand these things. And I believe that the Sahel gives us a practical example of what we can duplicate, even in micro, wherever we are. Because just like you said, the prisoners and putting them on the farms, even if it ain't farming in America, it could be entrepreneurship programs. It could be other things in America, other things in London, other things in Jamaica. But just the concept of dealing with prisoners in terms of reform. A lot of times we go to prison and we come home and our community don't even support our reform. Our community don't even care that I've been reading books for 5 years and now I need somebody to keep me on point. They don't care. You know what I mean? So there's a lot that we can do in terms of transforming the criminality in our community and ultimately the outcome of this prison industrial complex. We should deprive it. We should starve it. We should save our young people. And so when we see a young leader like Ibrahim Traore, he's any other youth on the continent. Anybody could be an Ibrahim Traore here. And so he has that stigma that Malcolm had. When we see Malcolm, we know all of us can do that. We can do that too. If Malcolm did it, we can do it. Ibrahim Traore is that right now to a whole generation of Africans, a whole generation of freedom fighters, not beyond Africa. So Africa literally, geopolitically, is being positioned central to whatever is going to happen next in this next century. And we have a big role to play, particularly as the African diaspora, particularly as universal African nationalists, people who are extending our sense of loyalty back to the continent in one way or another. We have a big role to play in the protection of the leaders of the African Revolution in our own communities and most definitely on the continent. So let's have a conversation about the protection of our leaders. Security is priority. Of course, remember where we are. We can't go into too much great detail, but let's have the conversation. Let's lead the conversation. Hopefully everyone out there, even if you don't know what we're talking about, you're researching, you're taking notes, you're Googling as we talk, you know, because you are getting a sensational education right now from an esteemed panel of brothers who know what we're talking about, and we live the life. So protecting our leaders, security is priority. Right now, we're in a revolutionary moment. What do we need to change? We talked briefly among ourselves about the African State of Emergency Collective that we sparked last year to provide safety and security program and emergency response program for the African diaspora who are traveling and deciding to move and live on the continent. We have no social safety network here. We have no security for ourselves. There's been murders, there's been robberies, there's been scammings, and it wouldn't happen if we had a social network. It wouldn't happen if we see ourselves as Africans first. It wouldn't happen. A lot of the differences in the diaspora impact how we operate on the continent with each other. And so I believe you have a generation of young people on the continent who we've never had in place prior to this, either in generational. You have thousands and thousands and thousands of Africans from the diaspora on the continent right now. I don't think it's ever been like this before. No one can point to me a time where there's been this many Africans from the diaspora returning to the continent for visitation and for work, to live. It's happening in real time. And so part of that is also a transfer of consciousness. Part of that is a transfer of culture. And so I just wanted to piggyback on what Brother Shakara was saying about learning the languages, making sure that we come equipped, that we don't sit down at the table unprepared or uneducated about what we're doing. This is why it's important for us to have these brief discussions, because they lead those who follow to their own conclusions. We don't want to dominate people's minds. We want to share our own thoughts and make sure that you can think for yourself, because that's the greatest security we could ever have, to be a self-thinking people. Every individual can think critically and get us where we're going. So to open that discussion up, I wanted to talk about the protection of our leaders and why security is priority in general within the movement, within the context of the discussion that we just had, particularly the Sahel with Ibrahim Traore's being, always targeted for assassination. What could us as members of the African diaspora do to ring the alarm and raise voice before they achieve their goal, to make sure that they can't achieve their goal? What can we do? What can we do to intervene in that matter to protect our brother? What about our leaders right there in the hood in Harlem? What about our leaders right there in the hood in Chicago, DC? What about Kingston, Jamaica? What about London, the ghettos of London? Black ghettos all around the world, we have leadership. What are we doing to identify, protect, and secure them? What are we doing? Because that's what time it is right now. I remember growing up, there was only maybe a few people in my whole city that had a little bit of consciousness, but everybody knew who they were. And everybody respected them because they were solid. They was consistent with their consciousness, You would see them and they would, hey brother, how you doing, sister? And you knew that they was the ones to go to if anything had to do with your rights or anything had to do with you making a complaint against white power or anything you had a question about, you can go to certain people in the community who we identified as community leaders. And so this is a broader conversation, but it's also extended to the continent. The protection of our leaders and why security priority as we move forward in the 21st century, given all of what we spoke about here today. I'll open it up to Brother Megas.
You know, I think first and foremost for this section of the discussion, we have to first talk about what is a leader. Because I like to take a meiotic stance when it comes to things. That's the way that I move as a meiotic man, truth and reciprocity. I don't believe in karma. Karma is a word originating in Indian culture. So for us, that's not our culture. Therefore, it's superstition. I don't believe that people are going to get their comeuppance because of karma. No, I believe in mayat, truth and reciprocity, things that we are supposed to be doing that is going to call us forward to champion justice for our people. So with that being said, I think leadership itself has been something that has been greatly destroyed of what a leader should be when it comes to African people, especially us here, trapped here within the hells of North America. We have been led by people who have been given a leadership hat. Case in point, Garvey said, "Up, you mighty race." He didn't say, "Up, you mighty race." You group of black people who identify as this. You group of black people who identify as that. He said, "Up, you mighty race." And we can point to detractors who were part of the Garvey Must Go movement, the Talented 10th, W.E.B. Du Bois, who Carlos Cooks even wrote about, talking about not only him being a part of the Garvey Must Go campaign, but him also going back into Liberia to get to recolonize Liberia after it was given to the Africans so that so that America could get the rubber. That's where Firestone tires, that's where they got their rubber from. And they still to this day get their rubber from Liberia, and they're poisoning those people. To him being with the birth control movement with Margaret Sanger, and yet somehow we still hold him up as a leader when you help to destroy who our leader is. And so keeping things in mayat, truth and reciprocity, when we look at people who, and especially when it comes to religious leaders, those leaders put their ideologies before that of the people. When we look at the kings of the Sahel region, we don't see that. We see people who are championing the mission. When it comes to, again, us here in the hells of North America, I do not like the term FBA and what they're doing, the xenophobic way that they are separating us. But there is one thing that they have done of importance. They have learned to champion a mission and not a person. They've championed the mission, and that mission has now gained the minds of a lot of our brothers and sisters who are now moving towards that mission without championing the person who put that idea into them. That is what we need to be doing. That's what we need to be focusing on. We need to be focusing on championing the mission. Our three kings, Baba Chiani, Baba Goita, and Baba Traore, they are championing a mission, and they have let it known that they are not the presidents. We are here to get this thing going so that our people can get some sovereignty. And once we have this country, once we have this one Sahel region established, then we'll put proper leaders in place. But those leaders will be chosen by the people. That leader needs to also adhere to the wishes of the people. You see, when we deal in politics or politricks all the times, we forget what the word democracy is. Demo and Kratos to the people instead of for the people. So whenever they espouse the words of democracy, they are saying that they are going to do these things to the people. This isn't for the people. And so we can look at every country, every nation around this world that espouses the words of democracy, and yet you will always see our people, the African people, the indigenous African people, always at the bottom totem pole of all power structures within a democratic society. Those people are championing the mission. We are not. And because of that, we don't look at people who are doing things for African sovereignty, and we don't champion the mission for them. If those brothers winning, it's us winning, because they are going to allow us to repatriate. Ibrahim Traore has already opened repatriation to Burkina Faso, or Burkina Bay, the upright man, Burkina Bay, as given by Thomas Sankara. That is what we need to be doing. And once we say that this person is our leader, we have to make sure we hold our leaders accountable to the mission, period. If our leader falters from off of the mission, consult with them. Give them grace. Give them the time to get back on track. But when you see your leader is falling off of the mission, that person is no longer your leader. That person needs to be disposed so that a real leader can be put in place. Until we get serious about what a leader is and what a mission is, we are only going to continue to fail. And that's why I look at the kings of the three Sahel to champion them and say that they are putting forth the mission.
Absolutely. I agree with you, brother. I absolutely agree with you, man. And I want to say that nothing that they're doing as leaders can be done with leadership. Leadership and leaders are two different things. Leadership is a quality that people have collectively. And so they're supported by a great cast. I listen to what other people within their governments and within their movements say as well. And they have a dynamic group of thinkers around them. They have great advisors. They have political analysts, economists. They got a cadre around them. And so their leadership is even that much more strong. And they're also building a young cadre. So they're building young people who have this thought, this thinking, so they can take it off of the man. So they can make it a national consciousness as opposed to just what Ibrahim Traore thinks and says. If 10,000 people or 20,000 people have the same political ideology and is fighting for the same mission, like you say, brother, then we're all leaders. And that's what I mean by leadership. Leadership is the collective, and leaders have to be held accountable regardless of what. And you're right, we must define what is a leader to us. And we need to hold that definition up to the fire. That's real, that's real, that's real. I believe that when we're talking about Malcolm, Lumumba, and Fanon, we're talking about leaders, and we're examining the leadership, that skills and talents that they displayed, and the value of those things. And when you look at Traore, that's why I said earlier, you can see that he's inspired by the same people who inspire us. There's like we share a consciousness with the brother, even if we don't share a particular ideology. There's a certain consciousness, like he right on point in terms of how he moves. And I believe that, a few months ago, I had the honor of having an interview here on Kimbunga Media with the Mali ambassador to the United States of America. And y'all can go check that out on Kimbunga Media to get an understanding from an actual diplomat who's been fighting for Mali for 25 years. He's been a diplomat for 25 years for the country, and you'll be able to soak up his own consciousness and get an understanding that these are national liberation movements. These people, the ordinary people, choose this. They call it a coup, but it's not actually a coup. They just had to seize the power in order to do what they're doing. And it's just causing a whole new dynamic among us. And it's setting new standards, even for us. Like, damn, if you see your brothers getting it in Sahel and you have opportunity to get it in, you're not going to join in? All that talk you talking about Pan-Africanism, all that Garveyism you be spitting, all that revolutionary rhetoric you be spitting, You ain't ready to form a direct solidarity relationship with the most revolutionary movement on the earth in probably our lifetimes in Africa. Venezuela is there already. Cuba is there already. It ain't possible without Russia holding them down with guns. Right now, the Tuaregs, those who were rebels in northern Mali, are begging for mercy. And there was a time when they were encroaching on the capital city. There was a time when the French military and the European military was there, and they was helping the Malian army, and they couldn't control the Tuaregs. But now the Tuaregs are begging for mercy. And if you don't know who the Tuaregs are, talking about the Islamists of northern Mali who spilled over after Gaddafi was taken down in Libya. They use these people who have legitimate struggle for their own nationhood against brother Gaddafi. And afterwards, a lot of them spilled down into the Sahel. And so we have been fighting that fight for a good 13, 14 years straight. Right now, they're begging. And so that's part of the victory that we all should understand and know about. But it's even bigger than the Sahel, Baba. Baba, I'm talking about leadership in the household, Baba. Baba, I'm talking about leadership as a teacher, Baba. I'm talking about leadership as an individual. I'm talking about setting new standards for us as a people, at the individual and the collective levels.
So, Chief, if I may, because I got to leave, Chief, but I got some things I got to take care of. But if I may, and I really appreciate the conversation, and I don't want us to stop with the reasoning as long as the brothers can remain. But I just want to get in some stuff real quick before I have to leave in relationship to the recent pardon of the Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey that was done by Biden. I want to make it clear that
Yes,
the UNIA RC 2020 back in 2021, we called for the exoneration of Garvey, and we still call for the exoneration of Garvey. We're not asking or begging nobody, but we're not disrespectful to the works that Dr. Julius Garvey and many others have done. In fact, they got a big session that's getting ready to take place here on the 26th, where they're going to be pulling together all the people that helped put that pressure on to do that. And I'll be there. It'll be at Howard University's law school. However, in terms of what you just were talking about, how important it is for us to stand firm with what we want our people to do. We've called for the exoneration of Garvey. And this being so-called Black History Month, I want to make it clear to everybody that the exoneration of Garvey means that he didn't commit any crime. Pardoning implies guilt. And I understand that an executive order coming from the so-called executive branch or the president couldn't do that based on their so-called lying laws. But we stand firm with the exoneration of Garvey, and that ties into the exoneration of all our political prisoners. It is critical. You mentioned earlier Mumi Abu Jamal. We got Jamal Brat Brown, Jamal El-Amin, and we got so many prisoners that have got out, and because of their treatment that they got while they were incarcerated, they are now ancestors. And it's a lot that I could name, but it's very Matula, and it's a lot I could name. But there's a lot of brothers and sisters who are incarcerated who should not even be incarcerated. And it is very important for us to stand firm with internal reparations. Yes, we want reparations. Yes, all the stuff that's been taken from us, we have a right to fight for that reparations. And we got all kinds of things that we could do with trying to get back what was taken from us. However, it is very important for us as African people to exonerate Garvey. And then after you exonerate Garvey, then you emulate the works of Garvey, Malcolm, Lumumba, and all the others. We could talk about Khalid Muhammad. It's a whole lot of people we could talk about that are now ancestors that warned us and set examples for us. But if those of us that are in prison in our minds, because I want to make it clear, we are political prisoners mentally, even though we might not be locked down, because we don't have our own control of our own destiny, our own continent, our own land. But for those who have been incarcerated, who should not be incarcerated, need to be not just released, but exonerated if they were political prisoners, because we would not even be here if it were not for many of those political prisoners that fought for us. Secondly, prisoners of war, which is anybody that's Black that's incarcerated. If you don't know the history of the penal institution of the United States of America, you got to understand that came into place shortly after the so-called transatlantic slave trade, when we were actually prisoners to Yurugus. And then now there's still a situation where we are prisoners mentally because we don't understand. We're witnessing right now the breakdown of the so-called three-tier system, executive, judicial, and legislative branch, that are all cowtailing to a bunch of billionaires that are not only taking control of America or American politics or US of A politics, but politics around the world. And their objective is to actually exterminate us. Garvey said, count on him to be the real Marcus Garvey in the Whirlwind, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. We know that they can never take us out completely because we got spiritual power, but they continue to kill us physically, and we stand back, too apathetic to understand what you were just sharing about what real leadership is. Leaders should be obedient servants to the needs of the ancestors, the Most High, and our people. So I want to make it clear, we stand for the exoneration of Garvey, but we want people to emulate his works, words, and deeds. That includes Malcolm, that includes Lumumba, that includes all of those that we did not name. And so it's very, very important for us to recognize that what we're doing is trying to speak truth to power so that the generations of young people that we're striving to educate don't make the same mistakes. And lastly, but not least, Garvey taught us, man can be a disagreeable beast. And I want to clarify that because everybody might freak out. I want to clarify that. If we allow the oppressor to continue doing what they're doing, then we are paying a disservice to all of those who fought for us to get our independence. So we cannot look at this as we're going to lose. We're going to win, but we cannot continue to lose African brothers and sisters, you know, by all kinds of means all over the world. And this system that's happening in the United States of snakes right now is falling. They are getting ready to go to civil war with each other. We don't need to be the cannon fodder of that civil war. We don't need to go into war for them. We need to be battling for ourselves. So as this Black History Month comes to so-called a close, as Dr. Carter G. Woodson warned us, we need to study our own history, heritage, and culture and take control of it, not for 1 month, every day. And so I just wanted to leave us with that. And I know it might be some other things that people want to say in relationship to that, but the gig is up. The gig is up. And Africa must be under our control. But I say free the land and the whole world, the whole world is ours. Africa is the base of the world. We are the creators of all civilization. There's nothing that we cannot do. All we got to do is have the willpower not to be afraid of Yurugu, because we know in the African tradition, he might kill some of us physically, but he can't kill the legacies. And that is why Malcolm, that is why Lumumba, that is why Thomas Sankara, that is why so many of our brothers and the sisters who have been killed and character assassinated need to be emulated so we can continue this work in 2025. And my closing statement, and y'all pardon my dog, he's barking. It's very, very, because he feel the vibes, I guess. She feel the vibes, but it's very, very important for us to recognize that we are closer to victory than we can imagine. But if we do not put together the proper structures for our young brothers and sisters coming up from young age, so that they're not fighting each other in the streets, but they're ready to be warriors in the movement, like what's going on in the Sahel states, we make a big mistake. I don't want to leave this physical life and people say, well, Baba Senghor sold us out. No, we are putting together the kind of structure that people can carry on. But we know in the African tradition, we live forever. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience. And our spiritual power is far more than they can touch. They have hoodwinked us to try to emulate a Urugu kind of systems. Those systems have failed and will continue to fail us. I want to appreciate the brotherhood, appreciate what we're saying right now, because this, of course, we could go on forever because there's so much we can say, but it is not about what we say. It's not about me, he or she. It's what we do. As Roy Ayers say, we got to be in the spirit of the do-do and bring the electricity forward. And I know for a fact, my Baba Ajay, Shakara, Sam, and all the other brothers that didn't make it in this round table, they had the same mindset. So it is important for us to leave the message out there to all our people. Garvey lives, Malcolm lives, Lumumba lives, Thomas Sankara lives, and what we do. Our ancestors been waiting and watching, children still crying and dying, only because we've been too apathetic to get up, like Malcolm say, and stand firm for what we believe, because we are going to win. We're going to take Africa back. But stop building other systems and let's build our own systems, be self-reliant, self-determination. And that is the message that all the ancestors that we holding up left, including Dr. Carter G. Woodson. I want to stress him because it's very important for us to recognize that the reason he put the weak together is so we could stop accepting what they say about us and for us studying ourselves and learning how to speak truth to power. I'll stop on that point because, as you know, I'm a long-winded Garveyite. But as I said, I got some other things to attend to. Baba Ajay, Shakara, Chief Fode, and my brothers, y'all know it is so important for us as the I, and I'm going to break it down in folk tongue. The I of the whirlwind has our ancestors with us. And Garvey say, count on him to bring countless millions of them with us. And we can go all the way back to ancient Kemet. Not slavery, but all the way back and bring that energy forward. No longer settling for projects when we got the electricity to build pyramids. So I say, stay strong, my brothers. Appreciate you all. And unfortunately, I got something else I got to attend to, but this has been great. I learn a lot every time I come up amongst my brothers and my sisters, because I don't want to leave them out, because that's why I got to leave right now. My queen is saying, you've been there too long. I got stuff to do. So stay strong, y'all. I love y'all. Appreciate you all. Chief, keep on. Shakara, brother, do what you do and stand firm and always know that can't nothing stop us. We are the eye of the whirlwind.
Jicho La Kimbunga. That's right. All right, Baba. Thank you so much, man. Thank you for even being here for the time. Tell the Queen Mother we appreciate her loaning you to us, the brotherhood, for a few hours. Baba IG, you as well. My wife she probably in there sleep somewhere herself. But this is what men do. This is what brotherhood requires. We all walk away with a greater understanding of the situation. I want to pass it to Baba IG. I know you will have something to say about the question of protection, but can you also touch on the Garvey pardon and the ongoing fight to free all political prisoners as well?
Yes, sir. Picking up from what Baba Senghor said, there's really nothing to add to that. I'm in complete alignment with what he said. Black people are too easily satisfied, and one of the goals of political education is to make Black people ungovernable by other people, and you can't be ungovernable if you're going by their definitions, standards, and priorities. So I agree completely with what Baba said. I'm not even going to be redundant in that aspect. I wanted to touch on things with protection that weren't discussed. And because I deal with political education, I wanted to say that one of the key ways we protect not just the leaders in continental Africa, but all over the diaspora, our own families and communities, is by not passing misinformation. Is by making sure our people know how to critically think. Is by making sure we teach our people what logical fallacies are. Is by making sure that we teach our people how to look through propaganda and dissect it, to point them to credible sources of information. on the continent and abroad, to point them to credible people who have distinguished themselves intellectually or in terms of organization on the ground. I think that's one of the key ways. I can talk about other stuff, but this ain't the forum for that publicly. But I think that's very important, that our information be accurate, that people are, when they're hearing stuff, they're hearing it from the right people, that we anticipate propaganda, and that we create protocols for the things we discuss, with whom we discuss them, and what we talk about. And with that, I yield.
Absolutely, absolutely. Information security, absolutely. We need to have the right information, and we need to pass it in secure ways. Absolutely, man. Ain't no other way to fight, brother. Ain't no other way to fight. We gotta have eyes and ears everywhere, boots on the ground everywhere too. If we're gonna return fire for fire, you know what I mean? So absolutely. Brother Megas, last statements concerning protecting of our elders, security being priority, and also Garvey's recent pardon, and just the ongoing fight to free our political prisoners, brothers. I believe personally that we're all prisoners of war, and that those of us who are incarcerated are prisoners of that war as well. That there's an extension that, you know, all Black political prisoners should be left free, and our community should be able to judge our own. None of us have gotten fair trials. We haven't created these damn laws and whatnot. So, you know, I really appreciate your analysis, and I want you to close us out tonight in terms of the importance of protecting our leaders, security being priority, and Garvey's pardon, freeing all political prisoners, brother.
I'll start off with a belief that I have taught to others, is that we all come into this world as as a book with blank pages. Anybody can write anything within an empty book. Therefore, parents are only given 3 chances to direct their children in a correct fashion. 0 to 7, 8 to 14, 15 to 21. During that time, it is integral for parents to instill within their children what it means for Africans. I'm speaking about. That's it. No one else. To instill who we are and the importance of who we are, and who our warrior ancestors are. Not who they were, who they are, because, you know, as Baba Sangora said, they live within us. We are them. As long as we continue to champion who they are and their missions, they continue to live on through us. It is an ancestor only dies once their name is no longer spoken. And so we need to keep that always at the forefront of teaching who we are, so that we never lose a consciousness within this whirlwind, because we all get that chance, that cycle to come back here. So with that, we do not get it right all the times, nor do children who go off to finally be adults, especially when we're growing up here within the hills of North America, or you're growing up in the divided kingdom, even on the continent. We see that there is always propaganda to separate all of us from one another. When you can look at the United States doctrine of DOD Memorandum 46, you can look at NSSM 200. These are planned things to get us to be separated. So anybody who comes forth, in my opinion, to separate us from being who we are is an enemy. Garvey did not do that. As I said, Garvey said, "Up, you mighty race." He did not see us by our differences of ideological stances or religious stances. He said, "Up, you mighty race." And we need to unite on that. We need to revere him for seeing us as a group of people, because, as we all know, it's easy to spread, fingers. You can't spread a fist.
Yeah, man.
We're stronger together. So Biden giving a pardon to our leader, to me, means nothing. They know that our people are emotionally, we're very emotional people. Therefore, it's easy for our oppressors, our enemies, to placate to us in emotional value trinkets. And we will see as the masses will go along with our false leaders who say, hey, give this person reverence because they just gave your group of people something. That's not the way that it goes. They still owe us. Blood deaths must be paid in blood. If we're going to settle for monetary trinkets, I don't think we're going to receive proper reparations. Nor do I think we'll, not within my lifetime, do I think we will get those debts paid in blood. As I don't know why our elder's name eludes me right now. The psychological racial personality writer.
Bobby E. Right.
But
Yeah, Bobby, right.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Bob.
man.
Thank you, Brother Shakara. Yes. So until we begin to first rear our children in the correct manner, going on into their adulthood, I don't think we're going to see that rise in our people outside of the Sahel region that we need to see. But it is not too late. I never give up. The moment that we give up, we die. The moment that any one of us here on this panel, anybody that's within the chat that's doing race work for us as a people, as one race, the moment one of us gives up, we as a race die. Always hold that in your heart. Know that when you stop, somewhere, somehow, there's going to be one person who you could have reached out to, maybe even more than one person that you could have reached out to, that is now going to go find somebody else that's espousing something else. And they're going to jump on that person's bandwagon, and they may become detrimental to us as a group of people. So never give up. I live here in Denver, Colorado. I since being here, I've called Black people gray because there is no race consciousness. They have been so integrated that it makes what I try to do here that much more harder. I have lost jobs. I have gone through financial woes. I have been stabbed. And do you think that's going to stop me? I'm still breathing, so I'm still going. Like I said, we have to put the mission forward no matter what.
Yes,
I have wife, children. It doesn't stop me. There is no fear. The moment we allow that fear to come within us, that's when we are going to start finding ourselves deterring from off of what we're supposed to be doing.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother Black Megas. Brother Shakara, I think we about to close out. That was pretty much the last statement. It was a great round table. Thank you, Baba Shakara, for setting it up as well, running the boards and the time as well. I know the Queen sister over there is ready to have her Baba, so it's all good, man. We're gonna keep this thing going. I feel newly inspired, and I feel like I've gained a lot of information from this experience. Again, this is Jicho La Kimbunga coming to you live with another Afrikan Survival Initiative roundtable as we honored Malcolm, Lumumba, Fanon, and we can't forget Medgar Evers or Robert Williams or any of the other great African ancestors who we are inspired by and who we represent the continuum of. Let all of our ancestors witness this and let them all receive our sacrifice for our people, because we don't have anyone else who we can look to that we know is real and that we know loves us and will want to see us free. We do this for them just as much as we do it for the unborn. And so what's important is that we're doing it and we're not talking about it. Thank you again, Baba Shakara, for the breakdown of the Congo-Rwanda situation. We really need that right now. Maybe some people don't understand it, but we'll reiterate it. If you have not studied and become, somewhat educated about the history of the Congo, the connection of the African diaspora to the Congo, to our traditions, to our bloodlines, the figures and the chronology of events over the last 100 years or so that has led us to the moment where we are right now with African brothers from another African neo-colony crossing borders and, you know, helping to create a catastrophe of life. Our heart goes out to the people of Congo and the people of Haiti, the people of Sudan. We can't forget our people even in Eritrea. We forget about the Horn of Africa. Our people over there fighting, man. They're over there fighting, man. They're in the same fight we're in. The same fight you're in right there in Denver. The same fight you're in right there in England. The same fight I'm in right here in Freetown, Sierra Leone. We have brothers and sisters all around the world in this fight. And so hopefully our message reached you. And we will be back next month with another round table. And the topic will be disclosed. Pay attention to Kimbunga Media. Make sure that you like, you subscribe, you share this particular roundtable. We spent 3 hours. You know, there's certain people in the movement who will charge you $30,000 for 3 hours of their time. You know, and that just shows you that, man, we ain't commercializing this struggle. Ain't nobody promised tomorrow. We need to make our marks today. We legacy building, we nation building. We're answering the call of our ancestors, and we're serving our unborn descendants now. Ashe, Abibi Tumi, Abibi Fahodie. With that, I'd like to close out. Unless Shakara, you have anything to say last.
No, bro, we're good. Give thanks to all the brotherhood for making this show possible. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, man. All right. So we'll see y'all next time, guys. Salute.